who will go through the participatory names just to confirm that everybody is actually here. So if you could just confirm when your name is called. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Convener. Convener?
Yes, here.
Vice Convener?
Present.
Councillor Bolton?
Here.
Councillor Alec Nichol?
Present.
And Councillor Yule?
Present.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, the agenda. First of all, we have to determine, because we're the Urgent Business Committee, that everything we have on the agenda is urgent. Can we agree that everything is urgent?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. And we also have to determine exempt business. We have one item of exempt business, which is at 8.1, work plans and business cases, the exempt appendices. Can we agree to take that as exempt business?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, it is also my intention today, because we've got quite a busy agenda, I intend to take 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 and 6.4 at the very end of the public session, so after 7.9. Can we agree that?
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you. And I also propose to take items 7.2 and 7.3 together, because they're obviously intrinsically linked. They're the external audit annual audit report and the audited annual accounts. Can we agree to take those together?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Right, do members have any declarations of interest to make? Yes, Councillor Yule.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, item 7.5, spaces for spaces for people. I am a council appointed governor of Robert Gordon's College, which is obviously impacted by the school hill changes. I don't intend to withdraw though.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll take a note of that. Any other declarations? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. We have no deputations today, and that takes us on to 5.1, which is obviously the minute of the previous meeting. Do we have any issues with that, or are we happy to approve that?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. So that swiftly, as we've moved the motions to the end of the public business, that takes us on to item 7.1. Now, this is the North East Scotland Pension Fund unaudited annual report and accounts. Now, I'm aware that because of this, people should have done pensions training in relation to considering this report. I have done that, so I intend to stay in the chair, but I believe we've got substitutions for other members. So if you could maybe just go through who's substituting, and that would help. Councillor Lumsden.
Yes, Councillor Bell will be substituting for myself in this matter.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, Councillor Malik will be substituting for me on this.
Okay. Councillor Nichol.
I have done the training, but Councillor Cook will be substituting for me as a spokesperson.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor
Yeah, I haven't done the training, and Councillor Delaney will be substituting for me.
Thank you very much. Okay, right. Mr. Belford, do you want to introduce the paper before I open up for questions?
Convener, sorry to interrupt. Could I just confirm everybody's in the meeting, if that's okay, just to make sure?
Yes, sorry, I should have let you do that. So let's go through that roll call just to make sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Bell?
Present.
Councillor Cook?
Here.
Councillor Delaney?
Here.
And Councillor Malik?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Belford, is he with us?
I am, Convener. I seem to
Thank
have a problem with my camera, which I think would require me to start my computer again, but I'll persevere at this point and introduce that report, if that's okay. Thank you very much. A few words of introduction. Firstly, my thanks to the pension team for working together differently this year to bring together a draft set of accounts for the pension fund and transport fund. It has been a significant and challenging piece of work for them, and they've done a fantastic job. Absolutely appreciate everything that they've done. I would also like to draw to attention achievements of the pension fund in relation to the merger that was implemented during 1920, effectively bringing the Strathclyde Transport Fund assets and liabilities into a single fund as part of the Aberdeen City Transport Fund, and it's now incorporated in the 2019-20 draft accounts. A significant change, I think, that's introduced into the draft accounts. And again, this was work that's taken months of planning, and the team have successfully executed the plans during the past financial year. It's a task not very often undertaken, and really did require the input of everyone in that team. Secondly, in relation to the North East Scotland pension funds themselves, the position at the year end from an investment perspective is somewhat overshadowed, I think, from what had been a very positive year up until maybe February, but improving markets since the year end mean that there is positives to take as we move forward into what is the triennial valuation process, which has been carried out during this year. Finally, the next step is for the audit to be carried out, and that we're meeting. Just wanted to advise the committee that myself and colleagues are meeting with external auditors, Audit Scotland, tomorrow in order to progress that. I believe our external auditors on this call this afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Belford. I'll open up for questions. The first one that I have is from Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Convener. And can I thank officers for preparing a very complex and comprehensive report. So I have one question really. In 2017, the fund was at 107% funding. That was good. At the end of March of this year, there was 107% funding. But since then, investment equities have fallen off a cliff edge. Now, I know there's been a very steep recovery, but I wonder if Mr. Belford could perhaps just give us an idea of where the fund is at this point in time, or is it not, or has it not been, valued as yet? But at least if you could give us an idea of the current trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belford. Can you give us?
Thanks very much, Convener. And in relation to that, yes, the percentage funding level does move around depending on the assets and the liabilities values that we have, and the fact that that's at 107%. I think what we saw between 2017 and now is an increase in the level of funded position, and that the figure I think you quoted in relation to the March 2020 position, it feels like we haven't moved very far, but actually it's testament to the strength and depth that we've got in the pension fund and the investment diversification, in order that we have been not only positively increasing the value, but it's been keeping up and has kept in a positive position over this time. I think what I was trying to say, without actually quoting any numbers, we don't have any audited numbers beyond March. Normally, that would be the Q1 position, which obviously ends today, is what we'd be looking to go back to. But clearly, we could distribute those as they become available in due course. And obviously, we take that to the pension committee in September if that's as scheduled. I think what we've seen in the intervening period has been an increase in the market position, and values have returned in certain asset classes, and I think there is a positive direction in terms of us continuing to be in an overfunded position, but that will only be something that we can clarify absolutely as part of the triennial valuation process. So while I can't quote any numbers, Convener, at this time, it's certainly something we'll be keeping an eye on. But I think the sense from officers looking at the current state is that things have improved since March.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Belford. Did you want to come back, Councillor?
No, that's super. Thanks, convener. That's excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The next person I've got on my list is Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. Can I associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Belford, thanking officers in the pensions team about the work they've done, and actually we ought to include Mr. Belford himself in that. Very, very quick question. On page 23 of the pack, in Councillor Malik's introductory remarks, there is brief mention of the rebranding exercise. From memory, I don't think that cost a huge amount. It was something like £3,500 or thereabouts. Could you officers just remind us of what the rationale for the rebranding exercise was, please?
Mr. Belford.
Thanks, convener. Could I maybe ask my pensions manager to comment on that particular aspect? I think the detail that she can provide. Ms. Collis, is that possible?
Ms. Collis. Yes,
Yes,
Ms. Collis,
yes,
would you
yeah.
be able to help us with that one?
Yes, indeed. As the fund took on introducing a new website to update our existing websites, we took the opportunity to do the rebranding as well, and to have it all done in one go. So that's really just to bring the fund up to date with modern sort of modern look and modern thoughts around how a website should look and feel. And yes, we just took the opportunity to do the rebranding at the same time.
Thank you. Are you content with that, Councillor Cook?
Yeah, content. Thanks, convener.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Malik, you're next.
Thanks very much, Laura. And answer to Councillor Cook, this rebranding was actually agreed in the pension committee.
Thank you, Councillor Malik. Did you wish to pose any other questions, or is that just helping to clarify the situation?
Just one more question. On page 58, just I think local authority pension fund forums total local authority members are 81 instead of 80, and then total assets are over 300 billion instead of 230 billion, and this is just a tiny mistake.
Convener,
yes, please.
I'll just take those away. Thank you very much. The draft accounts, we'll pick that up as a point to bring to our auditors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you, Councillor Malik, for pointing that out. I don't have any other hands at the moment to ask questions, so are we comfortable to move on? Councillor Malik, as the chair of the pensions committee, I think you were going to move a motion.
Thanks very much, convener. I have a motion. It can be circulated, and do we need a few minutes to go through? Or
Sorry, Councillor Malik, I've just noticed Councillor Cook's hand. I don't know whether he has perhaps a further question before we move on. Councillor Cook, did you?
No, it was just to say, convener, not a question, but I had a very modest, small, and I think non-controversial amendment to the recommendations, which Mr. Dunsmore has.
Okay, I think I'll take, first of all then, if it is an amendment, I'll take Councillor Malik first to lay out what his proposal is, and then we can see if, you know, if we can get agreement on that. We can obviously see what your slight amendment is. So Councillor Malik, do you want to, and perhaps Mrs. Dunsmore could circulate the relevant motion?
We'll do that, and I'll put it in the chat as well.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, Councillor Malik, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, just like Mr. Belford, our Northeast Scotland Pension Fund team has done absolutely brilliant job, and we must acknowledge the pension fund's account and annual report, which has been a great achievement and a huge effort by the pension team to pull together. And while the assets value are not as we would like them to be at the start of Q1 of this financial year, but heading in the right direction to lift the values back up. Also, the last quarter was not great as well. It was 1.9% reduction due to the COVID-19. As we have a recommendation from Northeast Scotland Pension Fund to review the annual audit account, and I have put forward this motion. So hopefully members will be agreed. As Councillor Cook mentioned that he had a slight amendment. So if we can go through my motion first, and then we'll see what is Councillor Cook amendment, and then we can make a decision then. Thanks, Councillor Ling.
Okay, Councillor Malik. Councillor Cook has indicated, so I'll bring him back in to see if he, what his amendment was likely to be and whether we can get some agreement on that. Councillor Cook, do you want to?
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, Councillor Malik's amendment looks absolutely fine to me. Mine is I say, a relatively minor one that could be tagged on to the end and become 2.3. So I'm happy with what Councillor Malik has proposed.
Okay, what is it that you are proposing then?
It's Mr. Dunsmore can circulate it, but basically all I'm saying is it's to do with the training issue, and it's basically to say in developing our training programs, we should take into account the need to minimise our travel costs and also our climate impact. It's not saying reduce training at all. It's not saying don't travel at all. It's simply saying when we move to the new sort of post-COVID new normal, we should continue to do some of what we're doing right now, i.e. do some meetings by video link. So maybe consider having some more of our training programs by video. It's not saying have a moratorium on travel, because I think, for example, the COSLA symposium, the LGC symposium in Edinburgh, I think very good value for money, and we should continue to do that sort of thing. Just want to make sure that we're being careful with our money, not traveling unnecessarily, maybe doing a few more things by video rather than necessarily having to travel all the time.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Malik, are you content to accept that addendum around that training? Not sitting on the pension committee, I don't know whether there is any difficulty caused by that. I mean, it seems a reasonable suggestion to look at ways in which the training is obviously delivered. However, you're doing it in a more streamlined manner, and thinking about the environmental issues of travel and etc.
Thanks very much, Convener. If it is just to go through this tough time of COVID-19, and then maybe it's acceptable, but otherwise training was discussed in our committee meetings few times, and it was unanimous decision that these trainings are essential and we must go physically and attend all of these trainings. And these trainings are very important if being a member of the pensions committee or a board member. So at the end of the training this year, I did ask this question, that would member be happy to come physically to attend these trainings, and it was unanimous decision that yes, we are happy and we must carry it on. And even Councillor McGregor comments, I remembered he said that this was amazing time. We had a very, very good training, and we went through about over 37 the representative actually giving us update what is happening in the market and how our funds are progressing. So for me, it's difficult to accept the amendment from Councillor Cook if it is the permanent that we just go through these training. I seriously do not agree that unnecessary training, because Councillor Cook mentioned that stop this unnecessary. There is no unnecessary training at all. These trainings are part of our job, and these are very, very crucial. So we must attend, and there is no wastage at all, because last year we had only once opportunity in Aberdeen City Council, and where few of our members, they were unable to attend their meeting due to other commitment. And when we go down in London or Edinburgh for training, then we are bound that we stay there for 2 days or 1 day and attend the whole session. We cannot move. And everybody is happy that these trainings must be carried out like the way we are doing. So I think, I'm sorry, I will not be able to accept Councillor Cook amendment.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Malik. That's helpful to know the discussions that have already taken place. Councillor Cook has indicated that he would like to come back in, so I'll bring him in just to see what his response is to that and whether he may consider making further adjustments to what he's proposing. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that we should reduce the amount of training. All I'm saying is sometimes if as is happening now, if universities can deliver some lectures online, it seems perfectly reasonable that we should do some of our training online in the same way. In terms of the COSLA seminar, the LGC seminar in Edinburgh, I don't have a problem with those. Because they're being organised by a third party, it doesn't cost a great deal to go to them. They're very useful. I would certainly go to them again. I do though query the value for money for going to London. Why we have to have almost 20 people having return flights to London and 2 or 3 nights in a London hotel to see some fund managers when there are lots of fund managers in Scotland. I find that difficult to justify.
Okay, I think, but in that case, it maybe sounds like we are going to have to divide on this, because I think from what Councillor Malik was saying, he believes that there is a need for that physical attendance at these events, particularly the London one, I think, was mentioned. So, Councillor Malik, you know, you're obviously the mover of the motion. Given what Councillor Cook has said, do you wish to stick with your original motion and debate rather than yes, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you have a seconder, Councillor? Yes,
Yes,
Councillor Bell is seconding that. Okay. Councillor Cook, do you have a seconder? Yes, I think Councillor Delaney. Okay, Councillor Malik then, do you wish to say any more to your motion before and then hear seconding? So
Yeah, very briefly, actually, as I said, that our team has done a great job, and due to their great effort, we have the annual account and report in front of us, which is brilliant, and our team. Aberdeen City Council Transport Fund has been increased from 203.5 million to 308.8 million, and this was another great effort of our team. They went through a very lengthy process of merger with Strathclyde number 3 funds first Glasgow, and thanks to them. But my motion, I will just stick with my motion, which I have actually put forward, and it's very difficult for me to accept amendment from Councillor Cook, because this matter was discussed various times in our committee meeting, and it was unanimous decision of all of the committee member and a board member. And now at the moment, although we are in a position, the committee member can make a decision, but still board members are very important as well. So they are excluded from this meeting. So I will not be able to accept Councillor Cook amendment, and I stick to my motion. Thanks very much, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Councillor Malik. Councillor Bell, seconding.
Thank you, convener. May I just say something now? Yeah. So really, just to endorse what Councillor Malik has said, that the officers have done a fantastic job. They do a fantastic job. The pension fund is exceptionally well managed, and we've seen that over the past couple of years. We've seen how it's grown. We've seen that even, from Mr. Bell saying, even from real troubles and tribulations in the stock market, it's on a good, healthy trajectory and management. And then with regard training, if I could just say a few words about that, and that really is that we absolutely have to do face-to-face training. I think Councillor Cook actually has already accepted. And all the fund managers that we talk to up down in the south of England, there are a very few in Edinburgh. They're all down in the south of England. So then it's a question of how would we coordinate all those officers coming up to Aberdeen to give us the level of training that we expect for a fund that's worth over £4 billion. Although there are quite a few members on the pensions committee, it's vitally important that they do actually talk to these fund managers, that they do look at them, to use a phrase, and see the whites of their eye, so you know whether they're telling porkies or not. And that, I think, actually knowing that you're getting a truthful story and truthful management from fund managers of that are managing a fund of this magnitude is vitally important. So I would actually argue that we do actually already manage our carbon footprint by not bringing all these people up to Aberdeen, by wasting money on hotels and all the carbon that goes with that as well. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bell. Councillor Cook, would you like to move your amendment?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about a lot about this. Can I again reiterate? This is not about reducing the amount of training, and it's not about saying all the training has to be done via video. In fact, my preference would be the majority of our training should continue to be done via video. Face-to-face. Personally, I find it much easier to learn that way because it's more interactive. However, the notion that we're managing our carbon footprint by not flying a few fund managers up from London, as Councillor Bell has said, strikes me as rather strange, because if 20 people from Aberdeen are flying down to London and back, that's actually more carbon footprint. Councillor Bell saying if a fund manager has to come up to from London to Aberdeen, that's wasting money on a hotel. But surely by that logic, if we go down and stay in a London hotel for 2 or 3 nights, that must be wasting money. And frankly, given the choice between supporting the hotel industry in Aberdeen or supporting the hotel industry in London, I would much rather support the hotel industry in Aberdeen. I've nothing against going to London. The more I go to London, the more opportunities I have to see my kids, both of whom work in London. But that's not the point here. The point is we need to be minimising our costs. Looking at the other items on the agenda, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, trying to find every last ball B to save. And I find it difficult to look our constituents in the eye and say it's absolutely necessary to go to London to meet some fund managers, when there are fund managers in Scotland. There are lots of fund managers in Edinburgh, and I find it slightly ironic that the London January session this year was held at the offices of Aberdeen Standard, who, and there's a clue in the name, have an office about 15 minutes from where I'm sitting at the moment. So the notion that the only place you can talk to fund managers is in London just strikes me as strange. We can ask some of them to come up to visit us here. If they can't, if they say, I can give you 2 hours if you're in London but I can't afford to come up for the whole day, we'll do that by video. But some of the people who've presented in the past in London have actually flown down from Edinburgh to give us a presentation in London, which strikes me as really strange. I certainly I didn't think this amendment was going to be controversial. It wasn't intended to be controversial. To my mind, it's non-controversial, and I don't really see the problem with it or why people have got a problem with it. But there you go.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. Councillor Delaney.
Thank you very much, Convener. Like Councillor Cook, I'm very disappointed that we're going to divide over this. It really was not meant to be contentious at all. We're looking at a different way of working nowadays. We're using the technology ourselves at the moment for this meeting. It's working particularly well. I would not be suggesting for 1 minute that all training should be delivered online, remotely, etc. What I would say is there are cases where for particular training sessions, this could perhaps offer good value for money. And I think that we need to be looking at this, especially when public finances are under such a huge strain. And we have talked about the size of the pension fund, and fair enough, the costs may be a small percentage of that. But moving forward, we've got to also look at where the pension fund is going to be in the future. And I think we're going to become more conscious as we move forward, because clearly stock markets have taken a tumble. Not everything is in the stock market, I understand that, but finances overall have taken a good hit. The pension fund, like every other pension fund, will take a bit of a hit as a result of this COVID situation. And I think we just need to be more mindful, and we should be justifying how we're spending public money. By all means, when training needs are identified, look at the particular offering. Can it be delivered remotely? Is it best delivered face-to-face? Take a decision on that basis, each case on its own merits. And I think that would be a better way of going forward, because clearly the technology is up to it, which perhaps it wasn't before. And I wouldn't want everything to be done remotely, but I think some things could be done as effectively on that basis. Also, with regard to our carbon footprint, as we move forward, as a council, we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint. We've done an awful lot of good work there. I think we could do an awful lot more. But if we are travelling for the sake of travelling, as opposed to travelling where we've fully evaluated the options and felt that perhaps is the best way, there is a big difference there. It's difficult to justify increasing our carbon footprint just because we do all meetings face-to-face. It's very much a case of what can be done remotely, how can we reduce the carbon footprint without actually impacting on the quality of training. Because the quality of training here, Convener, is what's really important. We get good quality training, and we get quite a number of offerings in the course of the year, and it's only right that we keep our knowledge up to date. But nobody's suggesting in any way compromising the quality of that training, just looking at what can be better delivered remotely and what should we actually travel for, because that's the best delivery method for it. So very, very disappointed in this, but I'll end with that. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Councillor Delaney. I'm disappointed as well that we've ended up dividing on this, because I think, as has been pointed out by particularly Councillor Malik and Councillor Bell today, that the pension fund has done an exceptional job over the last year. It's quite clear that it's incredibly well managed, and I think that's reflected in the accounts that we have before us in the annual report. However, the COVID-19 situation has had an impact, like it has across all sections of society, and I would hope that as you move forward in the future, you will be able to build on the strengths that are within not just the elected members who sit on the committee, but also officers that you're working with. Now, it's quite clear from some that have spoken today that that face-to-face dialogue is very important around that training piece. Therefore, I think it is probably best if today we don't go down the route of changing that significantly, particularly because we don't have all members of the committee with us. I think it is something, and it's quite clear from Councillor Malik's remarks that it's something that has been discussed on a number of occasions at the Pensions Committee, and I think that is probably the place in which that dialogue should continue in the future. So I will be happy to support Councillor Malik's motion today. So summing up, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Convener. As I say, disappointed that we're dividing. I didn't think it was contentious. It wasn't meant to be contentious. I wasn't saying reduce training. I wasn't saying do it all by video. It was just a tweak to take account of the new normal. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Malik, summing up.
Thanks very much, Convener. Yeah, I think it is sad that first time we have a division since I've been a member of the Pension Committee for almost 8 years and convener of the Pension Committee. However, I cannot understand why this issue was brought into my two good friend councillor, because when this issue was discussed in the committee various times, and it was unanimous decision that yes, these training are very, very important. And being a member of the Pension Committee or a board member, these training are essential. We do not take these 15 to 20 people every week in London. It is once a year. And it is very successful training as well. Now, Councillor Cook mentioned that it is waste the money staying in a hotel. I'm sorry, I do not agree with you that it is waste the money. It is for a good cause. You have to get training, and also Councillor Delaney said that there are other options as well. I don't think there is any other option. If there was any other option, then when we had the discussion in the committee meeting, why you did not mention that? So I would stick with my motions, and I'll leave up. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Malik. We'll go to the vote. Mrs. Dinsmore.
Thank you, Convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of Councillor Malik and an amendment in the name of Councillor Cook. Would members please vote motion or amendment? Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Bell?
Motion.
Councillor Cook?
Amendment.
Councillor Delaney?
Amendment.
And Councillor Malik.
Motion.
That's 3 votes for the motion, 2 for the amendment. Convener, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Dinsmore. And thank you very much to our substitute members who've attended for that part of the meeting. I think now, Mrs. Dunsmore, you maybe want to just confirm that we have our sitting members back.
Thank you, Convener. Convener is obviously here. Vice Convener?
Yeah, I'm present.
Councillor Bolton?
Here.
Councillor Nicholl?
Present.
And Councillor Yule?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That now takes us on to items 7.2 and 7.3, which we've agreed to take together. Before I open up for questions, I would like to ask Mr. Wilkie if he would like to give a few opening remarks in connection with our external annual audit report, and then I'll take in Mr. Belford after that. So Mr. Wilkie, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just explain our draft annual audit report and give some background to the audit conduct and status, and then summarise our proposed audit conclusions. I might speak for just a little longer than I would usually, recognising the limited time members have had to consider this report, and also that some members may be less familiar with the audit process. There are probably 3 factors that have contributed to quite a different nature of audit this year. There have been additional audit procedures and management actions to assess the impact of COVID-19, significant audit challenge around judgments and estimates, particularly related to two key audit matters around property and pension valuations, and also the impact of our respective teams working remotely. In the context of that environment and its potential impact on the audit, I'm really pleased that we're able to present our draft report. It is always a draft at this stage in the audit process before being updated to final following the signing of the accounts. And I think it's really quite extraordinary that officers and my team have been able to work together both to prepare the accounts and also to progress the audit to the point it is now, and that's some 5 months ahead of the revised Scottish Government deadline. There are a number of areas in the report which are shown in red and as ongoing at the time of drafting. I think it's worth noting that there were equally areas highlighted in the previous years when our report was presented at this time. And in terms of what I would call the normal audit work, we are probably further advanced at this point than we have been in the past. But because of some of those factors that I mentioned, the conclusions that I ultimately come to on the key audit matters in particular are outstanding. I don't anticipate further changes to the numbers, as we've outlined in our report and agreed audit adjustments with management. But at this moment, we haven't had the opportunity to completely review how they've been processed in the accounts, or for the KPMG experts that support the audit in those areas to provide me with their final versions of reports. So at the time of drafting, they're based on their draft reports to me. I'll then maybe just go through key aspects of our report and take questions at the end, or please feel free to interrupt me. Page 3 and 4 of our report then sets out the executive summary, and some keynotes are that I expect to issue an unqualified audit opinion. I've mentioned that there are some aspects of the audit to be finalised, primarily processes within KPMG, review of the statements and adjustments, and receipt of a small number of sample items. And I've summarised the impact of the audit adjustments on the deficit and provision of services, and that there is one proposed unadjusted audit difference that I'll come to. From page 8 onwards, I summarise the key audit matters, significant risks, our audit process, and the proposed conclusions in respect of each of them. I would intend to spend just a couple of minutes on each of those key audit matters to explain the audit process and the proposed conclusions that we have reached with management. First of all, on page 8, there is a presumed risk that management are in a unique position to be able to override controls. That exists in any audit. We've accepted that risk and completed our testing without identifying any such instances. On page 9, there is also a presumed audit risk, and that's around the recognition of expenditure. Subject to receiving the last 2 items of a sample of over 90, I will be able to conclude that there are also no instances of that risk arising. From this testing and expenditure, we did identify a couple of items of capital expenses which were incurred post-year end, but related to the year end at 31st of March. Management has agreed to and adjusted those within the accounts. We have also agreed a recommendation with management that some modification to the accelerated accounts closure process at year end would help to reduce the risk that these types of errors reoccur in the future. On pages 10 to 12, we've set out really quite extensive audit procedures this year around the review of property, plant and equipment valuations, and that includes investment properties. I'm sure management would confirm that they felt challenged by KPMG in this area, particularly this year, around the assessment of the components of TECA as they have completed. And that's been, first of all, to determine the appropriate categorisation of each of the assets, so whether they're operational or investment properties. And then secondly, the basis of those valuations, which could be on an open market value, at cost, or at depreciated replacement cost. And we've set out in the report the intended conclusions in respect of each component. We also challenged the way in which the carrying value of the asset under construction, which was not one original number, has been separated out and allocated to each of those components. And it's those two factors combined that have led to the ultimate movement in valuations, which we've reflected in the report, which brings the cumulative carrying cost of 394 million to ultimately be reflected as 319 million in the accounts on various valuation bases. Both the judgment around that categorisation and the estimates in respect of the valuation are subjective, and so I've agreed with management additional disclosures within the accounts which have been included to explain the judgments that have been taken and to provide some sensitivity analysis around the valuations. This year also, and consistent with what I've seen across a number of organisations, council's valuer included a material valuation uncertainty clause in their valuation report. That only related to specific asset categories, but equally management have updated these audited accounts to include a transparent disclosure that that material uncertainty clause exists within council's own valuation reports. I've shown some red text there because we use an internal KPMG expert valuer, and whilst I do have his draft report and we've been through a number of iterations and challenge with management, I do need the final version before I can ultimately be categorical in saying we're concluded in this area, and I do need to review management's processing of what are quite complex adjustments. On the next couple of pages, 13 and 14, we set out similar conclusions in respect of retirement benefits. Ultimately, we assess and benchmark the council's assumptions, and I'm content that those are reasonably balanced when taken as a whole. Again, I wait my actuary's final report, but I have based this on our draft, and that is after identifying some adjustments which were required in respect of the council's original figures from their actuary, which included some calculation errors and resulted in quite a substantial reduction in the McLeod liability from 28 million down to around 12 million in these final accounts. On page 15, we have one other focus area that is less significant in our audit than those significant risks I've just spoken about around capital expenditure. We continue to test a sample of additions and have no specific matters to draw to your attention. Pages 17 and 18 summarise the work and conclusions on going concern. I think I mentioned before that KPMG as a firm have determined that in light of COVID-19, we would have a rebuttable presumption that all opinions would include at least a material uncertainty in respect of going concern. Following consultation internally, I've rebutted that presumption, so do not propose to change in any way the opinion in respect of going concern. And I've summarised here the work that we've done in respect of challenge and review of management's assumptions. And this links probably quite nicely into the work we've done on financial management and sustainability, which I'll come on to in respect of wider scope. The next few pages of the report summarise conclusions on narrative reports and group accounts. I've just read text there in respect of the remuneration report, as we did agree some adjustments, but I've yet to check their processing in the accounts. They could be quite straightforward. Page 23 onwards then moves on from the financial statement audit to give our conclusions on wider scope. And these are objectives that we are required to consider by Audit Scotland's Code of Practice. The first is financial management, and in a number of areas we continue to highlight that the Council demonstrates best practice. That includes financial monitoring and early progress in considering the impact of COVID-19, as previously reported to this committee and again on the agenda today. On page 28, we've summarised the accounts production process, and as I've said, really extraordinary progress and support from management to get to this position in the context that we're operating in. We now reflect that we consider the Council's readiness in all but one area to be high. That one area which is low, and we've probably reduced from a prior year, is in respect of the consideration given before the audit commences to some complex accounting judgments, where some early consideration or more detailed consideration by management would probably further reduce the audit duration and help us be in a more complete position as at this time next year. We have made a recommendation on that basis in the past, and it's unchanged and still accepted by management. We also note on this page 28 one unadjusted audit difference that relates to accounting for the bond. This is a similarly complex area and one which we've challenged management and re-reviewed the complex Excel spreadsheets and models which are used that identified an adjustment which was growing in size and is proposed as being immaterial. It is below our materiality and not adjusted. I challenged management to consider whether there was potential for this to be considered material in its context as relating to the bond and bondholders, but I'm satisfied with their conclusion that in the context of its size, around 3 million, and the carrying value of the bonds over 400 million, that it is not material and therefore would remain unadjusted. You comment quite extensively on financial sustainability from page 31 onwards, again recognising a number of areas of good practice and what the good work the Council has already done to start to consider the impact of COVID-19. In particular, I might just draw your attention to the second recommendation we've made this year, which is on page 33, and that's around considering the complex legal and commercial arrangements which the Council has entered into. For example, we have reviewed in the past the Marshall Square arrangements, and this year I spent a lot of time considering various TECA agreements, both for the arena and development land. And I would reflect that those agreements often include a number of mechanisms which are well designed to reduce the Council's exposure to risk and incentivise and drive commercial income maximisation. But their complexity means that they do require significant oversight, and particularly in light of the potential impact of COVID-19, I've recommended that the Council reviews and reports on these arrangements to an appropriate committee. Lastly, and just coming to a conclusion, the remainder of our report also comments on governance arrangements. We've reflected the revised arrangements that are in place. On best value, including this year a focus on equal opportunities, with positive conclusions being reported in respect of that. And I wouldn't intend to present the appendices, but they do include the proposed and processed audit adjustments, which are quite extensive, a number of them related to property valuations. And then I'll just end there by saying, once again, thanks to officers for the support and time they've given our whole team throughout the audit process, because it has been differently working and really worked very well in the environment that we've been in. But probably no more to say from me, so happy to stop there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilkie. I think that's been very helpful for members to hear that update from yourself, so we appreciate that. I'll take in Mr. Belford before I open it up for questions to members.
Thanks very much, Convener. And thank you, Mr. Wilkie, for taking us through the report. Can I just first say that you'll obviously got a real sense of scale from Mr. Wilkie in terms of just the work and effort that's gone into this particular report. So apologies for the reports being presented late yesterday to committee members. I suppose moving on, changes to the draft accounts presented to the committee on the 6th of May are drawn directly from the external audit report and the work that they've been doing. And I suppose looking forward to signing them, I look to the work that Mr. Wilkie and his team have been doing to agree any findings and how these are treated in the accounts document itself. The accounts themselves, as presented at 7.3 on this agenda, have been fully updated in line with the findings of the external auditor and as detailed in the report. I note that we have a positive outturn position reflected for 1920 and tight financial management that stands us in great stead for the remainder of the year. It is good to know that we bring a level of certainty to these matters as we consider other reports on this agenda. Our balance sheet remains strong with over £1.2 billion of net assets, and usable reserves have been increased slightly in the year ended, enabling us to maintain uncommitted balances and to be prepared for the unknown. Mr. Wilkie has said that they were particularly challenging, and I can only confirm, Convener, to you that they were. But we do expect this, and I think that by working together, we've found appropriate measure in terms of the different aspects that have been discussed in great detail. And in my mind, true and fair representation of these adjustments in our balance sheet and accounts is something that I certainly have thought long and hard about. I am pleased Mr. Wilkie's opinion is obviously his own, and I note his indicative audit opinion on page 3 of his report that says he expects to issue an unqualified opinion, as he has told the committee. The fact that he can say this based on the positive place that the audit is in, I feel we could take forward the recommendation in my report to approve the accounts and ask you to do that, subject to the final checking and points raised by Mr. Wilkie in his presentation just before this. To be fair, and in concluding, bringing all of this together takes a massive amount of work that is intense and all-consuming. It has been even more so this year than any other. My thanks to the staff from across the the whole of the council have responded to and worked with my team to gather the necessary evidence, discuss issues and matters raised in a professional and constructive way, and to get us to what I read as an excellent measure of our financial management and financial stewardship. Special thanks I must extend to my own team for enduring the pain of me working them through elements of the audit to the nth degree that I know has driven them to distraction at times. They've all been professional, diligent, and ultimately fantastic. I take great pride in working with them every day. Finally, I'd like to thank Mr. Wilkie and his team for their approach and constructive and professional working relationship that we've developed. Convener, happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Belford. And, you know, I think it was good that you had an opportunity there to extend your thanks to your team, because it's quite clear from what we've heard from yourself and from Mr. Wilkie, the amount of work that has gone in to get us to this stage has been quite extraordinary. But it would be remiss of us not to extend our sincere thanks to yourself for that leadership role that you've shown to your team. So I know that you've been working flat out, and I appreciate your comments regarding the late arrival of the papers for members. But given that we saw the accounts at the May committee, and as we've heard, you know, there have not been major changes to those accounts, I'm hoping that members have had an opportunity to make sure that they have a good knowledge of what's within the actual accounts themselves. I'll open up for questions now, either to Mr. Belford or Mr. Wilkie. So do we have any questions? Yes, I've got Councillor Nicholl first, I think.
In fairness, Convener, Councillor Lumsden was definitely in well before me.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. No, firstly, just to echo your comments, Convener, on the thanks to Mr. Belford and his whole team, and also the Mr. Wilkie and the audit team, and just to thank Mr. Wilkie as well for the commentary on the report. Yes, we didn't have a huge amount of time to look over it, so I think it was really helpful to go through that. And once again, to congratulate the finance team for what looks is going to be another unqualified audit report. The only question I had was around the bond carrying value. And really just to ask Mr. Belford, is this really a difference of opinion financially, or is this something that you're going to be considering in future years?
Mr. Belford.
Thanks, Convener. In relation to the bond accounting entry that Mr. Wilkie referenced, it's as part of what is a very complex calculation. We noted simply an error that was in it that was resulting in, I think Mr. Wilkie referred to a £3 million difference. That is a one-off adjustment. We've agreed the nature and the basis of that adjustment, and we'll see that just adjusted once, and are absolutely confident in the correction being something that then endures in terms of taking us through the calculations for the remainder of the bond term.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nicholl, I think you were next, and then Councillor Ewell.
Thank you very much, Convener. And if I can add my thanks to Mr. Wilkie, Mr. Belford, and obviously both their teams. They've done an absolute outstanding piece of work, and all the more difficult given where we've had to go in terms of COVID and the difficulties that must undoubtedly have brought them. My main question to Mr. Belford was in the KPMG report, we are obviously advised that some of the assets that the council own are actually valued on a cyclical basis. But obviously we had specific attention drawn to TECA and some of those assets in and around that site. do we propose to use those valuations for all our assets on the same cyclical basis, or are we going to do them annually, or what? Are we making any changes?
Convener, in relation to that, it's a fairly, I would say, prescriptive approach, and the one that's generally norm within local government accounting and valuation of assets. We have two aspects that apply. One, our investment properties, of which we have many, are reviewed annually in line with normal practice, and that will continue. So those assets that have come online and been categorized as investment assets will continue on an annual basis to receive that valuation review. Other assets tend to fall into the category of being reviewed every 5 years. We'll start to delve into the finer details of the valuer and asking for their advice. But that 5-year cycle normally picks up a group of different assets each year and revalues them, and then the 5 years hence they get revalued again. Clearly what we were asked, and Mr. Wilkie mentioned being challenged, we were asked, and the valuers were asked about just the judgment of valuation of the wider scope of our assets in terms of the particular circumstances of COVID-19, and evidence and discussion and information has been provided in order to base the valuations, and those that are included in the 2020 balance sheet as presented in the accounts today are appropriate and relevant to this particular moment in time. As I say, we'll go through another valuation for March next year. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Belford. Is that anything further, Councillor?
One further question, Convener, thank you. The recommendation at 2.1 on 7.3, what a numbers in there, is saying subject to final amendments being agreed with external auditors as highlighted in their report. Is there going to be something published in the public domain that the auditors have come back with, just confirming that we're all in agreement? My concern would be somebody doesn't finally agree at the end of the day with one of the other parties, either for an accounting reason or some other reason. I wonder if we could just get some clarity in and around that, please.
Thank you. Mr. Belford, do you want to start? And I think maybe Mr. Wilkie, or is it?
Yeah, Convener, both the auditor's report and obviously our accounts will be public documents in due course. But in terms of the process, it might be helpful if Mr. Wilkie just advises how his report, once finalised, makes it to the public arena.
Thanks. Yes. Mr. Wilkie?
Thank you. I mentioned our report is always draft at this stage when it's presented. Following any final amendments to the accounts and those being signed, we update our draft report to final. That would include finalising on any of the adjustment numbers, the ultimate conclusions, and changing things like we expect to issue to we have issued. That version as final is then provided back to the council. It can optionally be presented to a committee. It doesn't require to be under regulations. And that version is also submitted to Audit Scotland and made public on their website at that time.
Thank you very much, Convener. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Yule.
Thank you, Convener. It wasn't so much a question as a comment, if I may. It was just to echo the remarks about, I put my camera on, echo the remarks thanking Mr. Belford and Mr. Wilkie for the sterling work of their teams in preparing these accounts and auditing them. It is a massive amount of work, and to be blunt, none of us really appreciate how massive that is. Can I also just thank Mr. Belford for taking the time this morning to clarify some points which I certainly found very helpful, and as always he is courteous and patient in explaining to those less numerically let's just say those who are not qualified accountants. Leave it at that. But in all seriousness, thank you to Mr. Belford for his time this morning in taking me through some things.
Thank you very much, Councillor Yule. I presume your talents lie in other areas rather than finance. So.
Convener, I have many talents, but
yeah.
this is probably not the best of them.
Okay. But yes, I think everybody echoes your sentiments around the help and support that they've had from officers around, you know, questions and things that they may have had in connection with the papers that we've had before us, as well as the work that's going on behind the scenes in order to produce them in the first place. I don't see any more hands for questions, so I would want to formalise what we're doing. I have a slightly adjusted recommendations, I think, which Mrs. Dunsmore can maybe circulate. Thank you. In effect, I'm asking that we approve the Council's audited annual accounts for the financial year 2019-20 as presented, subject to any final amendments being agreed between the Chief Officer of Finance and the external auditors, following consultation with the Chief Executive and the 5 political group leaders. And 2.2, approving the audited annual accounts 2019-20 as stated in paragraph 2.1 for those registered charities where the Council is the sole trustee, and to nominate Councillor Douglas Lumsden to sign those accounts. Are we happy to agree that, or do we have any amendments? Councillor Yule.
It's a question, Convener, just for clarity what you're moving. You're proposing that Councillor Lumsden sign the registered charity accounts?
Yes, I am. Having spoken to Mr. Belford, he indicated that it would be best if we had someone nominated for that. And as Councillor Lumsden is the chair of the Finance and Resources Committee, City Growth and Resources Committee, it was felt he might be best placed to do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions, or are we happy to agree? Yeah.
Agreed.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. That then takes us on, and thanks to Mr. Wilkie and Mr. Belford again for all their input there. Hopefully you will feed back our thanks to the members of staff who've taken part in producing these accounts. Thank you. That then takes us on, members, to 7.4 on the agenda, which is the Financial Resilience Recovery Plan. So there's no rest for Mr. Belford. Do you want Mr. Belford to say a few words on this report before we open up for questions?
Just a few words, Convener. I wouldn't propose to take you through the whole report. It's one that I think, based on where we are, is designed to address a problem, a situation and our environment that has been presented to us. I think we've acted early and brought to the committee back in May a position that we thought was emerging. And what we've managed to do is to respond to the instruction that you gave me then, which was to go away and refine what that looks like. So we've forecast that forward, reviewed where we are, and tried to basically turn every stone that we can in order to understand how we can deal with the known aspects of the financial environment in which we're working today. I think in doing that, we've presented a means of balancing the budget based on those known aspects, and those are captured as part of the report, the appendices, and then recommendations. What is unknown and remains something that continues to be an emerging position is in relation to our other aspects of the financial environment, and those are captured as far as we can in the report. I would point out that the changing nature of the guidance and the direction of travel in relation to the opening of schools literally changed as we hit the send button on last week around the draft report. So there's an addendum that was added last night, just bringing members up to speed with the latest information that we have on a number of areas. Clearly the unknowns is something that we'll continue to monitor, and by looking to bring back to the October City Growth and Resources Committee our Q2 reporting based on decisions taken today, and obviously updating members with the financial position. Clearly, I would also highlight to the committee that I've drawn reference to the fact that if circumstances were to change and we needed to do so, and I needed to do so, then I would be seeking an earlier committee meeting if that was necessary in order to respond to any other circumstances. But in the current time, with the known information in front of us and proposals from officers in order to rebalance and deal with the balancing of our 2021 financial position, there are proposals there for decisions to be made. I think I will stop there and ask if there are any questions, convener, to respond to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belford. I'm not sure whether you've actually had any time to sleep at all over the last few weeks, the amount of work that you've obviously been pushing forward so you could bring forward this report. It's, you know, we can't emphasize enough how much we appreciate all your work and your team's work, because I know that it's been right across all council teams in order to bring this report forward today. So I just wanted to extend my thanks before we get into the questions, because it's quite extraordinary the level of work that people have put in.
Convener, could I just respond and just say thank you for that, but also say that this report by no means is my report. This is very much all officers in the council. There has been an enormous amount of energy put into resolving this problem, which is a council problem. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'll open up for questions. Do you have any?
Convener?
Yes, I'm not actually seeing any hands going up for some reason. Not sure why that is. Okay.
I'll put my hand up. Can I go?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. For some reason, Councillor Lumsden, your hand does not seem to be indicating. It just tells me you're calling at the moment. So okay. Perhaps we might have to revert to the chat with people maybe putting in that they want to speak. But yes, go ahead and ask a question.
Okay. I've got a number of questions, and thank you, Mr. Belford, and your team once again. First question I had was on 3.42, and it's you know, there has been some discussion about councils using reserves to try and sort of fill gaps just now, and really just to try and get your opinion on using reserves at this time.
Mr. Belford.
Thanks, convener. Reserves, yes, a thorny subject at this point, in terms of, because when you have them, when do you use them? I think my advice, and hopefully I'm clear in terms of the position I've taken around advising the committee and the council, is that reserves are necessary. They're necessary for us to rely on for the future, for the unknowns. We have a reserves policy approved at the council meeting back in March, which was a revised one. In there, I noted that we had a risk-based approach to the value of our uncommitted reserves in there, and that potentially it would not be unreasonable for the council to think about an uncommitted reserve position of between 12 and 28 million pounds. We are at the lower end of that. The accounts that we've just spoken about have a 12 million pound uncommitted general fund reserve. I think that's a good place to be in, but it's one we need to stay in. We don't know what's ahead, and the report draws attention to a number of unknowns, which I've already highlighted. As a result of that, important that we maintain that level of reserve for the future, in order that we do not put ourselves in a position of, one, having to recover that position in the future. It allows us to effectively also think to the future around actually having a stable base on which to rely and deal with risk management. And as such, my advice, as documented in the report, is don't go to reserves as a natural place to resolve this problem, when we have 9 months ahead of us where we can control still a number of aspects of our business. And that's what my advice would be to you, convener.
Thank you very much, Mr. Belford. That's fairly straight to the point. Councillor Lumsden, you said you had a number of questions. You want to carry on?
Yeah,
and then
I will carry on.
Apologies, sorry, could I just interrupt? Councillor Nichols advised that he's dropped out of the meeting, so I'm just going to try and get him back in. I think something's gone wrong, so apologies.
Okay, thank you. Would we be best to wait and see if we can get him back into the meeting, given that we're obviously having answers from officers at the moment?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah. Shall we say a 5-minute break and see if we can reconnect? Yeah, okay, let's say 5 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Do you not have Teams on your?
I don't think so.
Microsoft.
So Nicholas, you back in okay? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, Stephanie, are you hearing me now?
Yes, can hear you. We just took a 5-minute recess for you to try and get connected back in. So thank you.
Yeah, apologies. They're actually literally in the process of digging up our street for city fibre. So I wonder if somebody has touched something they shouldn't have. I'll just stay on and just wait for everybody coming back in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You got it.
I think that's probably about the 5 minutes up, and I think we've managed to reconnect with Councillor Nicholl. Hoping that's the case.
Convener, it is. I can hear you. I can only apologise. I know City Fibre are actually working in my street as we speak, so I can only assume maybe something has happened with the normal connection. Yeah. Okay. We maybe should have made them aware that it was the urgent business committee today and the importance of that, but hopefully, fingers crossed that that's you back. I'm conscious that a question was asked of Mr. Belford around the use of use of reserves, just when I think we lost you. So I'm not sure whether you heard that response, whether you would like it repeated before I move on. Could I have it repeated, please? I didn't. I got the beginning of the question, and Mr. Belford froze at my end. Thanks. Okay, Mr. Belford, would you be able just to? I understand you might not be able to do it word for word, but could you give us the gist of the response that you gave to Councillor Lumsden earlier, please?
Yes, Convener. You might not want me to give all the words. I will try and be more succinct. In terms of the reserves, effectively, what I was saying was, we have a reserves policy that is there that underpins the basis for having uncommitted reserves. That's risk-based, and at the moment we're at the lower end of that. It's not the place to be going to reduce that at this time. I think we've got time during the remainder of the financial year to exercise control over some of our other areas of expenditure in order to manage what we can and deal with the situation. Therefore, reserves at this time is not the place to go. And I think if you look at the appendix to the report, actually, I suggest that for future, and given the level of risk, perhaps we should be looking to increase the value of our reserves rather than deplete them at this point. My advice to the committee is to not go to reserves in order to resolve this budget shortfall.
Thank you for that, Mr. Belford. That's helpful that we've had that repeated. I'll continue with Councillor Lumsden, and then I've got a couple of hands from Councillor Bolton and then Councillor Nicholl.
Okay, thank you, Convener. Second question was around 3.58 in the report, and really in relation to the IJB. It states in there remains a risk in terms of the financial contribution that the council may have to make to balance their financial position. I'm just trying to work out why there is a risk, because in 3.62, it seems that the Cabinet Secretary gave an assurance around the mobilisation plans. So why does that risk still exist?
Okay. Mr. Belford, can you shed some light on the apparent disparity there?
Convener, I suppose the starting place is to say from this report's perspective, we are relying on that commitment to fund those costs. What the report was identifying was that the legal structure of the IJBs through to the council and our partnership with the NHS in there is a legal structure that under the integration scheme that results in, if they were in a deficit position and they had no funds to manage that, then the deficit must be shared between the two partners. I describe in the report that's shared approximately, I would say approximately, because it's not been tested and we've not had to do this, 35% council, 65% NHS. And as a result, there remains a risk that if the money in order to fund the projected extra cost that the IJB is forecasting is not made available and does not come to the IJB, then there is a risk. I mean, effectively, there is a possibility that might come to pass on the council. Clearly, we've asked the IJB to be mindful of that, and they propose to take action around that with a recovery plan, assuming the non-recovery of all of the money, or at least updating to take account of the latest information. And I think they propose to do that in August in terms of considering that position. So remains a risk at this time.
Okay.
Clarification. Councillor Lumsden?
Yep. Then moving on to 3.78 and 3.79 of the report, test and protect. So it was really just to clarify here. So we're expected to play a part in this process, but we don't know the impact, and we don't know the cost, and we don't know if we'll be reimbursed. Would that be correct?
Convener, I think that's what the report's essentially saying, is that there are clearly aspects of business and government instruction that mean that we need to consider continuing our response, if you like, to the COVID-19 pandemic, the advice and guidance that's there. Clearly, in the current emergency situation, we're relying on civil contingencies in terms of our direction for that. And at this time, it's unknown the extent to which our obligations will incur, if there are obligations, to what extent they would incur a financial cost. Therefore, they're recorded in the report for your awareness. And obviously in that section of the report, I also say that if funding is not made available, and actually it's something that needs to be reported, we'd be looking to report that early if that was going to cause a fundamental shift in our resources again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Last question I had just now was around education, 1.9 on the supplement. Just wanted to double check something here. So it says that we're looking at an extra 5 million for education for pupils going back 100% of the time. So is this factored into the budget that we have today, or is it still a bit of an unknown where it might come back later to, where we'll have to make changes again?
Convener, again, the report, the £5 million was based on an estimate as we were looking at the school's plan that was, and I've forgotten the official title, it was just recorded in the report, but the plans that had initially been announced, we thought with the distancing requirements and opening of schools with blended learning and so on, that was an initial estimate of the potential cost. Not yet been able to look at the full cost implications of the schools opening in full at this time, and there clearly are a number of constraints there.
Okay, so just, I guess, so the quicker we get guidance on things like school transport, for example, then the quicker we'll be able to formulate exactly how much it's going to cost.
Sorry, Councillor Lumsden.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid I think we've lost Councillor Nicholl once again. He's dropped out of the the meeting. I'm not sure whether, I'm aware that we've obviously got a number of people observing, whether it might have been an idea to have somebody come and substitute on Councillor Nicholl's behalf if we're going to have continual difficulties with him being able to access the meeting this afternoon.
Convener, I can try and see if he wants to be dialed into the meeting. He might prefer that. Do you want me to see if I can get hold of him?
Yeah, okay. Let's offer that in the first instance, but you could perhaps ask if that's not going to work, if there is somebody that could perhaps substitute for him. So I would suggest maybe we take another 5-minute recess just to allow you to do that, and then we can come back and see where we are. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry to have cut you off, Councillor Lumsden. Save that for when we come back.
I'm used to it by now, Councillor Lane.
Councillor Nicholl, sorry. Sorry, you're on mute. Oh.
Apologies, sorry.
Sorry. Sorry, I've just seen your email pop through. Just 1 second.
I'm just trying to give us a built-in braces. I get a feeling this must be connected to the work outside. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you like me to just call you into the meeting by phone? Would that be the best thing to do?
Yeah, I'm sitting with Audrey's phone here beside me. So if you do it to Audrey's phone, I'll come in on that one. Is that okay?
Okay, I'll do that just now. Thank you.
Hello. Unknown participant is now joining.
Councillor Nicholl, is that okay?
Hello, Alec.
Hello, Councillor Nicholl.
Speaking.
Hi, is that worked okay?
Yeah, that's actually clear. Obviously, I don't have you on the thing at all, but I'll just have to shout if I'm wanting to join in to ask a question. I take it.
Okay, I don't know if you can have both on at the same time is the only issue. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've turned off my Teams at my laptop because otherwise I think you get quite a lot of feedback. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, folks, I think we've maybe got Councillor Nicholl back online by telephone. So we'll maybe, yes, thanks, Mrs. Dunsmuir. It's not ideal because for him to indicate that he wishes to take part, it's more difficult because it doesn't obviously come up on screen. So we'll maybe just indulge, and if Councillor Nicholl, if you do wish to ask a question, if you could maybe just indicate that by speaking. I think Councillor Lumsden was just asking a follow-up, and then I did have Councillor Bolton who had indicated that she would like to come in next, and I think I had Councillor Nicholl was after that. So if I maybe take Councillor Lumsden back in.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. It was just the last point really around just saying that I would imagine the quicker we get guidance around school opening in terms of school transport, for example, then the quicker Mr. Belford and his team will be able to see what the impact financially is going to be to Aberdeen City Council.
Convener, I can only say yes to that.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Convener. You'll be glad to know that we've got, I think, is that you, Councillor Nicholl?
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to join in, sorry.
Okay, it's all right. Sorry, you'll be glad to hear that two of my questions have already been asked, one on the IJB and one on the test and trace. The other one I was just wanting to ask about was obviously at 2.6 to 2.9, we've talked about the early years expansion and the opportunity to perhaps have to use some of the money that's been allotted for that. It was really, I know that there's some further information in Appendix 5, but it was really just to kind of understand, if we do have to use it, are we likely to get further grant from the Scottish Government to compensate for what we've had to use through COVID? Or is it really just down to us to have to try and square the circle, or circle the square, whatever you want to say?
Square the circle, I think it normally is. Mr. Belford, can you give some reassurance to Councillor Bolton that if that money was used, that there might be more coming? Maybe you can't do that, I'm not sure.
I think, Convener, the point being that I said in introduction that we'd turned over every stone. The Cabinet Secretary, in announcing the last lot of funding, made it clear that and it's referenced in the report, made it clear that the money of that we were going to receive 5.5 million in there. There wasn't any further funding that we should expect to get, therefore we're not expecting that, and that we should look to exercise the appropriate use of flexibility that they've basically offered around the early years monies. I've sought to do that and work with the teams in order to say what is appropriate spend, how do we offset that. Clearly, if we were to receive more funding, then that would offset either this funding, but at this time we don't have the statutory obligation to progress the 1140 hours at this time, but obviously mindful that that's something potentially to come back onto the agenda in the future. But at the moment, we're making the best use of, I think, all of the levers that we've got available to us that that we've also been directed to as part of this pandemic and response.
Okay, if I just could come back, convener, because I omitted to obviously thank all the teams, as Jonathan's referenced, have taken part in turning over the stones. And I really appreciate the efforts. And I know that this is an extremely fluid situation. It's like trying to catch wind because it's, you know, constantly changing from minute to minute. So I do understand and appreciate that you're working up to the last minute to get these papers to us, even as much as last night. So it was just really to thank you for all the efforts, and everyone else that's on this call who I know have been working tirelessly to help us close the gap that's being created through the COVID epidemic. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Nicholl, did you have a question?
Yes, indeed, convener. Thank you. A couple of them have been asked already, but obviously in the papers, round about page 200, 201, we were looking at measures that may be taken by the officers to deal with this. And two of the recommendations were to slow down things, and one was crisis grants and community care grants. And it was really just to seek some assurances from officers in and around what that would actually entail to obviously minimise the impact for our very vulnerable people.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Mr. Belford, are you able to answer that, or would it be?
Yeah. So the position around that, perhaps the way in which I've worded it in the report there, I think the main point there is the increased level of demand. So actually trying to manage the resources available in order to deal with the demand. What we've done during the response phase has been to step up the number of people helping in that area in order to keep up with what we've seen as a high level of demand around those funds. We would obviously look to prioritise absolutely the most critical of those applications and make sure that they're progressed. But we do recognise that the level of resource might change as staff who have been taken from other roles potentially have to go back. And we've also got to recognise, and perhaps as we go forward, anticipated continued high level of demand. So I suppose what we're saying is that there might just be the extent to which we need to respond and identify where our resources are in relation to the volume. But we'd obviously keep a watching brief on that in order to manage and make sure that those vulnerable individuals are supported to the very best of our capabilities.
Thank you very much.
Do you have something else, Councillor Nicholl? Any other questions?
Yes, please. Appendix 11, the forecast outturn on common good. I take it that will be revisited as the year goes on, depending how long we remain in lockdown. I'm looking at some of the expenditure potentially for things such as civic receptions, which obviously just won't be taking place at this point. So I take it those figures will be being amended once we know a little bit more.
Mr. Belford, the common good budget. I know that we already have had notification on some events that are not taking place, but there'll be others, as Councillor Nicholl's pointed out, that may be under threat as well, given the current situation we're in.
Convener, I think that's absolutely right. That I do expect there to be changes, and I would capture obviously the latest update on that as part of our Q2 reporting to the October committee of CG&R committee. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Anything further, Councillor Nicol?
No, thank you very much, and apologies for dropping out there.
That's all right. We're glad that you're back with us. Councillor Ewell, I think you were next with your hand up.
Thank you, convener. I had a number of questions, but obviously others have been reading my notes because I've only got one left. And that, I suppose that becomes a TLN, Charlie. Can I take you to page 150, convener, and recommendation 212 in relation to the council will not make any recommendation that the council not make any refunds for services altered as a result of its response to the pandemic. Is that just referring to services funded through the council's, I'm going to say core income, or does that include services where people pay a specific charge for a service that the council provides? So, for example, those who pay their 30, I think it's still the £30 garden waste permit, where they signed up on the basis of a fortnightly collection, and for very good and understandable reasons that's not been possible for some time now. Is it also proposed that the council make no refunds in those cases? And I may have a follow-up.
Convener, yes, that is the case. I think that the terms and conditions that were signed up to in that particular instance and in others clearly allow the council to adapt to changing circumstances. Clearly, we had a gap and reintroduced the service at a slightly different level, but that recommendation would cover that as well. Convener.
Can I just say thank you? That's helpful in clarification. I have one constituent already, convener, who's a solicitor and is planning to take action against the council over that. But I'm sure that's something that Mr. Bell and his colleagues will deal with if it arises. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ewell. I don't see any further hands, so I think we can move forward. I have a slightly amended set of recommendations, which I'm hoping can be circulated. We'll be aware that there are a number detailed in the report, most of which are included in my motion that I'm moving. I'm pleased to hear. But there are a few additions at the end. I'm conscious that we have a large number of recommendations before us, so it may be worth us taking a little time to look through them. Could I have indications, is there other amendments that people have to the recommendations? Yes, Councillor Ewell. You have some?
Well, it depends, I suppose, convener, what you move, but I, yes, potentially have an amendment.
Okay, well, what I would propose then, I think my amendment is currently on, or my motion, I should say, is currently on screen.
Yeah, but without a magnifying glass, we can't read it.
Yes, I'm wondering, can that be?
I think, convener, I think it's been sent out via email, and it should be shared in the chat just shortly.
Okay, thank you. If I can maybe just check, does Councillor Nicol, if he's on telephone, does he have access to that email?
I do indeed, convener. I'm reading it now. Thank you.
Okay, fine. I'll give you a couple of minutes then. Councillor Yule, do you have a question?
Thanks, convener. Just check. I've done a quick read, obviously, as others are. Can I just double check though that 2.1 to 2.16 remain unchanged, and that you're just simply adding at the end?
Yes, that's correct.
I wish I'd said that before I read them all. Thank you, convener.
Just checking you're on the ball.
Yeah, well, I'm always on ball, convener, but thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Has that been sufficient time for everybody to have a look? Do we still have people with us?
Hey, Jenny. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm fine.
Yeah. Just wondered, thought for a minute that I might have gone off connection.
No, you're there.
Councillor Yule, do you need a bit more time to digest that before determining whether you have an amendment or?
No, thanks, convener. No, that digestion has finished, and yeah, happy for my amendment to be circulated if you're agreeable to that. I'm adopting a different approach, Charlie, so I don't think that there's any prospect of the two sitting together.
Okay. Councillor Nicholl, are we expecting a further amendment?
No, I will. I've very kindly seen Councillor Yule's amendment, and I'll be happy to second it.
Okay, that's fine. And I'll just check I have a seconder. I'm fairly certain I do.
Yes, oops, sorry. Gosh. Oh gosh. Sorry, I'm trying to
Are you managing? We can hear Councillor Bolton. We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
I was just trying to get back on. Yes, I'll be seconding you, Councillor Lane.
Thank you. Okay, I think that is. I think we now have Councillor Yule's amendment being circulated. So I'll maybe just give a couple of seconds just for us to have a look to see if there's any common ground. Not sure what that noise is.
Sounds like somebody's playing a musical instrument.
We have a few technical issues today. Okay,
Special branch listening.
sorry.
I
Having
thought
looked-
special branch listening in, convener.
Okay. Having looked at the amendment, I can clearly see that we're a million miles apart. So I think we'll just move on to formalise. So I'll begin by moving my motion this afternoon. I think it's safe to say that none of us, when we set our budget just a few short months ago, expected to be in the position of looking for further savings on top of the near enough 35 million that we put through in March. But you know, hindsight's a great thing, and obviously we have experienced what can only be described as a generational change to our society in the last few weeks. Our country went into lockdown in effect, and COVID-19 swept not just our continent but across the world. And every aspect of everyday life has changed overnight, I think it's safe to say. Now, I want first of all to start by paying tribute to the staff about the efforts that they have made during the last few weeks and months, because make no mistake, tackling COVID-19 has already required massive intervention by us as a local authority, and indeed by people right across the city. Staff undoubtedly stepped up to the plate, as I thought they would. We're very fortunate to have such a dedicated and committed workforce, and it's, you know, I think we can safely say that they have stepped forward to make sure that they are maintaining the safety and well-being of the citizens of Aberdeen. I'm certainly extremely proud of each and every one of them, and I'm sure we may divide on other things today, but I'm sure we can agree on that. I think the work that they've done to date has been amazing, and it's clear that despite the challenges that they are facing, they will continue to do that moving forward. We need to ensure that we're providing the help and support that the city needs, but it comes at an additional cost. And it's clear from the papers that we've got before us today and the ones that we've seen at the previous Urgent Business Committee that us stepping forward with that response to COVID-19 has clearly had a major impact on the finances of the council. Now, that's been as a result of us providing these additional services, but it's also about the loss of income that we've experienced as a council. And there isn't anybody that's sitting around a table or in their homes today, as we're doing virtually, but there isn't one of us that doesn't realise that the underfunding of local government over a last number of years has meant that when we have additional stresses put onto our income base, then we have great difficulties. That's why we've had to be innovative as a council. That's why we've looked at areas in where we can raise that income in the past. And because of that, the impact on our council has been even more significant. But when only about 14% of your funding comes from Scottish Government and the rest is being raised locally by business rates, council tax and fees and charges, I think it's safe to say that when there is a lockdown of this nature, our council is undoubtedly going to suffer more than others. Now, we have seen some funding coming from government, but I think as we see from the papers in front of us, it's quite clear that that goes nowhere near plugging the gap that we currently have. We have made sure that we have tightened our belts. We did that at the last Urgent Business Committee, where we looked at ways in which we could lock down that spending. But it's clear from the papers we have before us today that that gap still remains very large. Now, Mr. Belford, in answers to questions and in the report itself, has shown where we have used flexibility, whether it's with the early learning and childcare budgets and diverting that money to help plug the gap, or indeed using, you know, some around our contingencies and things. It's quite clear that that is not the way to go. Mr. Belford, I think, to Councillor Lumsden's questions, was very resolute, probably the strongest I've heard an officer when talking about the use of reserves. And I think we all accept, of tempting as it may be, that is not an area in which we can look to utilise. Now, when we're drawing up these plans, we want to make sure that we're protecting the people of Aberdeen as much as we possibly can. But I think, I mean, I've never been slow in writing to Scottish Government, as you know, to complain about funding. But I think it's clear from correspondence that we've had from Government, I think it's clear from the information that we received from COSLA, that the chances of extra money coming down the line anytime soon are few and far between. Now, because of that, we need to take steps ourselves, because although we are at the start, or the first quarter of the financial year, we know how quickly time passes by. And I think it's clear, if we do not make decisions here and now today that helps us to close that gap, then we are only storing up problems moving forward. So that's why when I see I'm a bit disappointed, if I'm honest, at what I have seen from Councillor Yule and Councillor Nicholl indicating that he's going to support the amendment, that is about us deferring a decision today and taking a further meeting of full council, because every minute that we wait in order to take action is a minute lost. And from some of the information that we have in the reports that are coming later in the agenda, it's quite clear that we have to be on the front foot now around that not just the rescue piece, but the recovery piece for the city. Now, within the report, we've got various aspects that tell us of the uncertainty that's further down the line, whether that's around IJB funding, whether it's around our ALIOs, whether it's around us trying to get our schools back in operation 100% of the time, or indeed the test and protect that we may be involved in moving forward. All of these things are likely to have an increased drain on our resource, and that's why we must make sure that we're making prudent decisions. None of the decisions that we will be taking and I'm putting forward today have been easy decisions. Make no mistake about that, but they are decisions that we as a council need to take, because today shouldn't be about politics. It shouldn't be about that party political knockabout that we have. It should be about us coming together collectively, that collective leadership of this city, to make sure that as a council and as a city, we are shaping up our plans so we are as financially robust as we possibly can be moving forward. Because as we go into that recovery phase, we will still have an obligation for the people of this city to provide the frontline services that they rely on. We need to make sure as an employer we're providing our employees with opportunities in a safe and secure environment so that they can deliver those services for the people of Aberdeen. So what I would say to you is that what we have before us, as we heard from Mr. Belford, no stone has gone unturned in order for us to come forward with the money that will allow us to secure our financial position in the coming months. That's not to say we won't have to revisit some of these things. That's not to say that we won't have to make attempts to lobby at various levels. But if we do not make a decision today, the consequences for this council and the city of Aberdeen would be severe. Already the figures are showing we will be one of the worst hit cities and indeed places in Scotland, next to only Inverness, I think. £359 per person in the city is what the BBC are quoting. That'll be the cost of the COVID-19 crisis. But we need to make sure that we are taking those decisions in order to move the council forward, because the people of Aberdeen rely on us to provide those services. And that's why we have to make difficult choices today. We've done that as an administration. And I think in the amendment that we have put forward today, the recommendations, it is setting us up on the best footing possible for that recovery phase that we'll go into. There's a couple of other things that we've talked about where we've identified some money around that commissioning, director of commissioning post by not filling that in the coming financial year, and also by the surplus that we have within the papers. That gives us in the region of just over £140,000 that we can set aside to fund that socio-economic recovery that will be so important to this city. And therefore, I would commend the report that we have before us. I would commend the recommendations that I'm putting forward, and I would hope that other members could come together collectively and support that, rather than put forward an amendment which will actually just defer the difficult decisions that we've got to make for a longer period of time, which can only be detrimental for the citizens of Aberdeen. And I would hope that people can support the motion. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you very much, Convener. And you kind of almost finished on a line that I'd like to start with. I'll get my camera. And that's no stone left unturned. And I don't know what, by deferring another 2 weeks, which stones we think we're suddenly going to be able to unearth something astronomically great or hopefully not bad. But, you know, we've come together as a city, and it's not just COVID that we are facing in this city, but it's also been the downturn in the oil industry. People's livelihoods are on stake here, and they're going to become more and more dependent on the actions that we take as a council to protect them as we move forward. We heard from the convener when she talked about us working as one. And we've seen the voluntary sector, we've seen people volunteering, we've seen our own staff taking on roles they never envisaged they would have to. But they did what was necessary. Now, I've certainly spoken to my group, and I know certainly Councillor Lang and Councillor Lumsden have had discussions with our members, because it has been an inclusive process. It's not just been down to Douglas, Jenny and myself. We've made sure that people understand within our groups what is happening, that we have very little choice. We're up against it, and when we're up against it, Aberdeen usually comes out fighting. We don't lie down. We're a victim of our own success. As Councillor Lang said, we already raise around 86% of our own income in the city to help our city thrive. This is not a time to divide, it's a time to unite and make sure that the city is put first and to make difficult decisions. And we will reflect on them. And we heard from Mr. Belford that we will be coming back in October having reviewed. As we talked about last week, 1 minute the schools were only going to be open 30%, and our officers are worked tirelessly to get that plan in place. By the afternoon, it was open 100%. So the situation is so fluid. You know, we're never going to be able to nail it down in its entirety, but we have to make a start. And I think today gives us a solid foundation to move forward for the city. Let's not delay, let's not dither, as we've often said in the past. Make a decision, stick to it, and move the city forward in a positive manner. Do it together, not apart. Thank you, Convener. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Ewell.
Thank you, Convener. Like you, Convener, can I start by thanking Mr. Belford, the CMT, and all the other staff involved in preparing this paper and in the massive amount of work that has gone into doing so. It's quite astounding, particularly at a time when Mr. Belford and his colleagues have also been dealing with the external audit and the preparation of the finalised accounts. Can I also thank Mr. Belford and Mr. White for taking the time to spend with my colleagues and I, not once but twice, going through the issues in front of the council. This paper, as I said, has been prepared with their usual professionalism and prudence, and rightly points out, Convener, that the council is between a rock and a hard place. Convener, you started, or early on in your remarks, you said that you and I were a million miles apart. We're not, Convener. I agree with almost everything you said. I agree that our staff have stepped up in a fantastic way to the challenge, the unprecedented challenge of COVID. I agree about the level of your comments about the level of impact on the council because of our particular circumstances in terms of where our funding comes from and how we raise such a high proportion ourselves. I also agree with your comments. You're rightly recognising Mr. Belford's advice about the use of reserves. I also absolutely agree with you about future uncertainty. Where we disagree is in relation to points 6 and 7 of my amendment. What's before us today are very, very significant changes to the council budget, as you said yourself, convener, just agreed 3 months ago, which is slightly more than 3 months ago now, I suppose. And those are unprecedented changes at this point in the financial year. Now, I don't argue with the need for those changes. The reason for them is, very sadly, reflected every day as you move around the city and as you see the illness and sadly still deaths and statistics for Aberdeen, Scotland and the UK. But my point, convener, and I'm delighted that Councillor Nicholl supporting this, is that I believe that decisions of the scale that we're being asked to make today should be made not by the reduced membership of the Urgent Business Committee, comprising just 5 members, but by the full 44 members of the council, and which is why I'm proposing that we remit this report to a special council meeting held within the next 14 days. So it wouldn't be a 2-week delay, convener. It would be an up to 2-week period. Obviously, the sooner the better. We have the technology to do that, convener. We can do that. Now, convener, I can't help but comment and plead in support of my case. Comments that both Councillor Malik and yourself made earlier this afternoon in relation to the item on the pension fund, when Councillor Malik said that there should be no changes made to the pension fund training approach, and that Councillor Cook's amendment should be rejected because members of the Pensions Committee were, quotes, excluded from the meeting. And you yourself, convener, in summing up, I think it was in your summing up of that item, said, quotes, we don't have all the members of the committee with us, so that there should be no change made. My argument is that the changes that clearly need to be made, the council is between a rock and a hard place, should be agreed by the full council. Convener, in your proposing your motion, you said this was a decision that we as a council need to take. Absolutely right, convener. We as a council need to take this, and that means all 44 of us, convener. Convener, you also urged us to, again, quotes, come together as a leadership. Convener, back at the start, or just before the start of the lockdown, I made an offer, and Councillor Nicholl made an offer, that we wanted to work collegiately, corporately, as Team Aberdeen, with you and the other administration leaders. And most recently, convener, we made that offer in relation to the preparation of the socio-economic recovery plan, which before us at item 7.6 today. And you rejected that offer that we made to work as a single team for the benefit of the city. You told us the council has a political leadership and that we weren't part of that. We've repeatedly made offers to work cooperatively, convener. You have repeatedly either ignored them or rejected them. The offer is still there from the Liberal Democrats, and we will continue to want to work cooperatively. But in this case, we believe the right place to make the decision, the important decision about this massive change to the council's budget, is not by a 5-person urgent business committee, but by a meeting of the full council held within the next 14 days, so that all councillors have the opportunity to be part of that decision-making process, in the same way as both Councillor Malik and yourself said that you believed all members of the Pensions Committee should be part of the decision-making process about any changes to their training programme. If it's good enough for the Pensions Committee, it should be good enough for the Council, convener. So I would urge members to support this amendment. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Yule. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, convener. Obviously, I agree very much with the comments and would wish to align myself with the comments of Councillor Yule. I would reiterate with him that no one is fundamentally disagreeing as to the problems that we face going forward. I think the real issue we divide on here is one of democracy, openness and transparency. Essentially, we have a situation whereby 3 members of Aberdeen City Council will potentially pass this mini budget without the input of the remaining 41 councillors in the council. I think that's to be hugely and deeply regretted. As Councillor Ewell pointed out, back in March, it was you yourself who asked that all the members of the Urgent Business Committee would come together and work collegiately for the benefit of the city. But as we've seen again today, the administration once again say one thing and do another. The best example, I think, has been correctly highlighted by Councillor Ewell, that it's good sauce for the Pensions Committee that they all have to be present to make a decision, but it's not sauce for the gander for the council to all be present to make a decision. It's very disappointing. Bitterly disappointing, to use the words that Councillor Lumsden was using to describe the financial settlement achieved through COSLA, because we really aren't seeing practice reflected from what is actually being preached. I do think when we hark back to only 3 months ago, when we were sitting in council discussing the budget, there was a wide range of input across the room. The vast majority of members participated in the debate and contributed to the debate, and suddenly we now find that that's not appropriate for some of the most difficult decisions that this council is going to have to take, and which will impact on the citizens of the city beyond this financial year, but certainly for the remainder of this financial year. I think it's to be very much regretted that you haven't found the time to actually practice what has been requested, and I will have no hesitation in supporting Councillor Ewell in the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Lumsden.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I'm actually quite amused by some of the comments I've actually heard. I just want to start on a real positive point and agree with Councillor Ewell and thanking staff for all the work that's been done. No stone has been unturned to come back with this the report today. Unfortunately, what we see from the opposition is really, when you look at the amendment that Councillor Ewell is proposing, there's nothing really much there. It's all defer, dither and delay, and push the decision further down the line. Another 2 weeks where our finances would be even in a more worse state than it is just now. So decisions that we're making would have to be harder. Again, you know, we are here today to make a decision, and that is what we should be doing. I am surprised with Councillor Nicholl's remarks about that he is the budget. It shouldn't just be up to, I think he said 3 members of the administration. I'm surprised because at the budget meeting in March, he was happy to accept 95% of the budget that was put forward by the administration at that point, listing off all the amendments that he was happy to choose from. So I just presumed he would be willing to accept what the administration has put forward today. And what the administration is putting forward today is action. It's making the tough decisions. It's, you know, it's just what we're elected to do. We are allocating money to help in the recovery process in the 141,000 that's been identified, and that would be delayed by not making a decision today. So I think, you know, we really just need to get on with it. And I would have concerns about having a full council meeting in 2 weeks. We've seen the technology problems that Councillor Nicholl has had today, and I can imagine that when there's 44 members, that would only be amplified. So, you know, we've got the report today. We've put forward the budget. It's a tough decisions we've got to make, but we need to make that decisions now before it's any worse. So, Convener, I will be happy to support you today.
Thank you, Councillor Lumsden. Summing up, Councillor Nicholl.
No, it's me, Convener. Councillor Nicholl.
Apologies, Councillor Yule.
Thank you, Convener. I will be brief. I'm pleased to hear that Councillor Lumsden's amused. I don't actually think there's an awful lot to laugh about in what's before us today. Councillor Lumsden tells us, Convener, that there's nothing much there in the amendment that Councillor Nicholl and I are proposing. No, what is there is democracy, accountability and transparency. That's what matters. I said in my remarks, and I seem to recall Councillor Nicholl saying the same thing, that we don't dispute the horrendous position the council's in, the very difficult decisions that need to be made, but that we believe that the people to make those are the council. Now, Councillor Lumsden tells us that maybe the reasons for not doing that would be that the IT problems. Well, I have to say that our colleagues in Aberdeenshire, now you've heard me say this before, have now had, I think it's now 2, possibly 3, but certainly 2 full council meetings during the lockdown where they have all successfully participated. The meetings have gone ahead without problems, as I understand it, using, in their case, Skype. If it works for Aberdeenshire, it can certainly work for Aberdeen City Council, and I do not see why we can't have a 44 councillors in a Teams meeting. There were certainly at one point an awful lot more than 44 people in this Teams meeting today, but I don't see why we can't have 44 councillors in a Teams meeting to decide on this issue. It's about democracy. I will say again, the Liberal Democrats are committed to working with you, and we've made that offer, and I know that Councillor Nicholl has said the same thing. But Convener, you yourself rejected that most recently at the last Urgent Business Committee over the socio-economic recovery plan. We would have been very happy to participate in that. You told us that we weren't wanted. It is a little bit rich now to turn around and say we're not working as a team when you rejected us as being members of that team. But Convener, to try and end on a positive and on a point I hope we all agree on, whatever happens when we vote on this item, the important thing is that we do all work together to support our staff, to support our city in the unprecedented challenges, which are not going to be over the next few months. They're going to be over a number of years. And we're up for that, and we remain committed to working with all other parties in the council to do that. But Convener, it does take more than one to tango, and I can often say we're happy to this metaphor is getting a bit stretched, to join that dance, but others need to say yes as well. And you, Convener, are the one who said no to the dance. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Yule. I'll maybe start because I think you do Councillor Lumsden a disservice. I don't think at any point did he say he was amused at the subject matter. I think he was amused at the lameness of the amendment that was coming forward from yourself and Councillor Nicholl. Because as always, it's the usual story. We hear you talking at great length about how you want to play in the game, you want to make sure that you're playing your part in that civic leadership role within the city. But yet we see you coming with amendments of this nature, which completely undermine the whole of the report and the work that has gone in from the staff behind the scenes. Let me start by dealing with the situation about who is determining this decision today, who is making that decision. We are here as the group leaders of this city council. Now, as Councillor Bolton has pointed out, I don't know how you operate in your groups, how yourself and Councillor Nicholl operate, but certainly within the groups within the administration, all of our councillors have had full knowledge of the papers that we've had before us. They've all had full knowledge of the discussions that have taken place as an administration, and we have come to that point and made difficult decisions as they are. But that's what being in administration is all about. It's actually having to make decisions and follow them through. It's not about fudging the issue, coming forward with amendments dressed up as democracy and openness and transparency, when in actual fact you are just dithering and deferring and delaying the decision. I don't know why I'm surprised, because to be honest, in the time that I've been on the council, I've seen little else coming from the Liberal Democrats. I am a little surprised at Councillor Nicholl playing second fiddle to you regarding this, and indeed how keen he is to be writing to his government by this and the motion that he has before us today. He seems there's a great keenness to be writing to the government. It's a pity you weren't quite so keen to write when we were looking for extra funding previously, when you refused to sign the letter. So I'm not sure if that's collective responsibility and leadership, but that's, I have to say, what we see. And that's the reason that we take the decisions that we do regarding whether we'll work with you or not. Because at the end of the day, this administration is committed to moving forward, making sure we are putting in place the services that the public out there that we represent require. And that, if that means taking difficult decisions, then that's what we'll be doing. Now, we've heard a bit about the technology, and I don't think anybody sitting in the meeting today can say that things have gone particularly well. I mean, we've had Councillor Nicholl actually out of the conversation twice. We've had him now having to come in by telephone because, and it's nothing to do with the technology that we have, but it seems to be because there are some issues in the street in which he lives. So for you to suggest that we should defer this incredibly difficult decision-making process for another few weeks in order to allow members to take part when we have absolutely no guarantee that each and every one of them will be able to do that, then I don't think that's a good idea. And what I would say is, when we're talking about democracy, I mean, I know a fellow councillor that represents my ward who's publicly said in the newspapers that he does not trust the technology and would not be taking part in it. So I'm not sure if the people of Midstock and Rosemount would feel that that was fair representation for them if we went down that route. But what I would say to you is, I would like to take you back to what we are talking about today. We're in an incredibly difficult position, not of our own making, but as a result of a public health pandemic that has swept the world. We as an administration are ready to step up to the plate, along with the officers and the hard-working staff that we have in the council and right across the city, because we need to make those decisions. We'll see the reports that are coming later about the socio-economic plan, how important it's going to be for us to make sure that we are kick-starting our economy. That's why we included within our recommendations the one that related to us putting the money in order for that socio-economic plan to actually start to be delivered, because that is what's going to make the difference to people's lives. Not sitting about waiting for another couple of weeks to get together and chat about things. When all the information is before us today, I would have had greater respect for you if you'd come with alternatives to what was before us. But that's the whole issue here. And that's the reason why this delay is not acceptable. Because as we've heard from officers, they have looked at every possible area they can to make sure that they are providing us with that information to plug the serious gap that we've got in our finances. So another 2 weeks and 44 of us getting together in a virtual meeting is not going to change that. The circumstances are there for all to see, they're stark, but we as an administration are ready to step up to the plate, take that leadership role that the city is crying out for, and make sure that we are putting measures in place that will help to protect the frontline services and jobs that the people of this city depend on. And I'm disappointed that you haven't been able to come along with us today. And it's an unfortunate position, but I would hope that the public out there will see that leadership is required. We need to move forward with these recommendations, and I would commend you to support the motion. Let's go to the vote.
Thank you, Convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener and an amendment in the name of Councillor Yule. Would members please vote motion or amendment? Convener?
Motion.
Vice Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Bolton?
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl?
Amendment.
And Councillor Yule?
Amendment.
3 votes for the motion, Convener, 2 for the amendment. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Dunsmore. That takes us on to item 7.5, which is spaces for people. Do we have questions? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
Right. Thank you, Convener. Obviously, we've gone through this in a very tight timeline, but part of the discussions when we first got on to speaking about obviously the measures we had to put in place, some of the information we received was around the potential having to see licenses for premises to be able to open safely. Can you give us a little bit more about that? Because clearly part of the measures we put in place was to make sure that we played our part to allow them to get these licenses if they were required.
Mrs. Cttee, are you answering that one?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, so one of the things that we were really keen to do, clearly as part of the economic rescue work, was to make sure that there was a one-stop shop approach for businesses and others to come to the council around these issues. So, as you say, something as unique as in a situation that we find ourselves in that's so unique, it is important that both planning, licensing and environmental health colleagues are working together so that business customers in particular can have the one contact and get a seamless response. My colleagues in licensing are working very closely with the Spaces for People team to ensure that consistency is there.
Okay, so can I just come back, Convener? I think that's a good answer on another part, but I was actually talking about the suggestion by the Scottish Government about something to do with self-certification, allow them to be open, and we had to provide adequate space outside for queuing, etc. So it was really around that, because we haven't really heard very much more from the Scottish Government about the self-certification, which obviously was a real driver for us to get things done quickly.
Yeah, so my colleagues in environmental health and trading standards were involved with the work that was looked at for the self-certification scheme. There's been no guidance on that to date. There was guidance that was published yesterday round about safer spaces for people, but that's really looking very much at the urban design elements, but not at those specific issues to do with self-certification. We do have a clear role in terms of informing people and looking at the enforcement role that we play in partnership with the police, but that self-certification scheme hasn't progressed at this moment.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mrs. Beattie.
I have Councillor Nicholl next, I think.
Thank you very much, Convener. Thank you, Mrs. Beattie, for the report. It's very, very helpful. But obviously, we're in a situation where things are very fluid, and I'm sure that's going to continue for some considerable time. We've had various groups reported in the media taking a position on some of the work that has been undertaken, and I just wonder if you could perhaps provide us with a little commentary in and around the buses in Union Street, which seems to have attracted some commentary. Obviously, many of them are now going Guild Street, Market Street. Now, when it started, I think the bus services were down to about 40%, and they've recently gone back up to around 80%. I wonder if you could give us some thoughts as to how well that is projected to work. given the narrowness of some of the pavements in the Market Street, Guild Street area?
Through yourself, convener. Yes, I mean, clearly this is a very fluid situation, and it was only a few short weeks ago at the last Urgent Business Committee that we were requested to put forward the bid. We put forward the bid, we got the 1.76 million, and we've implemented measures in a very a pace that's commensurate with the fact that this is a public health emergency. I think the pace that we've worked at, and we've always been really clear with all the groups that we've engaged with, means that we are looking at the scheme as that situation develops, and it will be an iterative process. We will make changes to it as we go along. We're working on timelines that can sometimes shift. So in terms of the opening of premises, that's not a fixed element, but also the level of people on public transport, the level of people who have a confidence in coming back into the city centre. These are all issues which which we are dealing with in terms of trying to make sure that we're taking all the stakeholders with us. We have weekly meetings with the bus companies. We picked a diversion route that they had used before through the city events team, so that it wasn't something that was unknown to them. We're monitoring it through, obviously through the signals team, looking at the sort of the technicalities of how those junctions are working. And it will be, it is a work in progress. We'll be monitoring it. We have a monitoring group. We've invited the bus companies onto that to make sure that we're making best use of everyone's data to make sure that the city centre can work effectively.
Thank you, Mrs. Beattie. Do you want to come back, Councillor Nicholl?
Yes, please. Obviously, as we move forward, there will be a move towards next big event. I suppose is probably going to be phase 3 of the recovery programme. What main changes do you see happening as that comes into play?
So the main thing will probably be the reopening of restaurants and cafes. So the current timeline, if that is confirmed by government, shows that will happen outside first and then inside, and then the opening of the shopping centres themselves. So there are a number of big events that are likely to impact on that public realm, and certainly the attractiveness of it and the ability to attract people but still keep the physical distancing as required is something that's forefront in our mind. We are doing this for public health reasons. I'm joined today on the call by my colleague Chris Littlejohn, who is the Deputy Director of Public Health from NHS Grampian, because we have to work side by side with those colleagues in the NHS, because we are constantly just stressing that we are not doing this, we're not doing this because we want to, we're doing this because this is dealing with a public health emergency.
Thank you for that, and it was remiss of me at the beginning, but if you could pass on your thanks to your team, because I'm sure Mr. Dunn and some of his colleagues have been, certainly from the emails I've been receiving, have been working very long and hard hours over this, and it's very much appreciated the promptness of some of the replies to concerns that have come in from constituents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Yule, you have your hand up, I think.
I did, convener. Thank you. Can I just first of all echo what Councillor Nicholl said about thanking Mrs. Beattie, Mr. Dunn, and all their colleagues, because this has obviously been an exceptionally, I don't want to say rushed, because that suggests it's not been done properly, but I've done very quickly in exceptional circumstances. Convener, there's no doubt that initially the introduction of this, which was done at pace for absolutely very good reasons, did cause some confusion. surprise maybe amongst some citizens. But I just wanted to again put on record my thanks to Mrs. Beattie and her colleagues, because the communications and contact with local communities, including in the Midstock Rosemount convener, where there's obviously been work done or planned for Rosemount, has improved dramatically, and I think that's going to assist. And people may not be happy about what happens, but if they understand why and have an opportunity to contribute to a wider discussion, hopefully that will assist. My question, convener, well, I've got two questions. One is just if Mrs. Beattie could confirm that local councillors will be part of that conversation. I know it's not a formal consultation process, convener, and the timescales don't permit that sort of formal exercise. And this is just these are just temporary arrangements. But if local council, Mrs. Beattie could confirm that local councillors will be part of the conversations going forward. And secondly, just on a specific point, as I was turning into Broad Street this morning, travelling west on Union Street, I couldn't help but notice a couple of cars doing U-turns on Union Street at the Market Street junction when they realised they couldn't turn left down Market Street. I appreciate there needs to be access as far as the Adelphi, but if maybe we could have a wee look at the signage there, because obviously if vehicles are doing U-turns, yeah, that's not good for the drivers of those vehicles or pedestrians or potentially buses turning right out of Market Street, not expecting to find something doing a U-turn. Thank you, convener.
Thank you for that, Councillor Yule. I mean, you're quite right that I represent the Midstock and Rosemount ward, as I've mentioned earlier, and I certainly have had a great deal of consultation with officers around that, and I'm very appreciative of that. And I'm sure Mrs. Beattie will confirm that that will happen in other areas as well. I know George Street and other areas, the members are very content with what the discussions that have taken place. On that U-turning bit, Mrs. Beattie, you'll maybe fill us in, but because the whole of the country is looking to bring in measures of this nature in city centres, signage is in very short supply, and that may well have impacted on some of the interventions that we're trying to bring in. But Mrs. Beattie will maybe fill us in a bit more on that.
So taking the points in reverse order, convener, certainly in terms of the signage, that has been an issue. The signage was delivered yesterday. Unfortunately, the team were trying to put it out in probably the worst of the summer rain, and they have gone back and checked that today. What they've also done is used our variable messaging signs, so the big boards that you can't really miss, as opposed to the smaller yellow signs, just to reinforce that message. But again, it is, this is a learning curve for everyone in the city. These are significant interventions in the public realm in a very short period of time, and the temporary nature of them does mean that we are relying on signage and people understanding what measures are being put in place, and certainly the communication, which I am happy to confirm with elected members will continue. One of the things that we're going to try and put in place is just a fortnightly update briefing to all elected members, because as we start to move out of those specific ward interventions but into the active travel corridors, it's going to be more difficult to get everybody spoken with. So we will try every effort that we can, and we've really appreciated the inputs of the local members, because they are the eyes and ears on the ground, particularly at a time like this when a lot of our traditional communication channels have been quite truncated. But we have had, we've had traders groups, we've had community councils, we've had the Community Council Forum have been really helpful. So we've managed as much as possible to get as much engagement out there as possible. The reality of it is that these are temporary measures, but they are also measures which, it's difficult for people to agree with every part of them, and there are many stakeholders involved in this. There's the public, there's the shopkeepers, there's bar owners, there's the public transport operators. So it is the cyclists and pedestrians. It is a very challenging agenda, and we are all grateful for all the assistance that we can get and all the information that we can get.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Beattie. And I think elected members would welcome that briefing sheets. I know that you have been briefing group leaders, and I certainly have tried to make sure I'm cascading that information down to my own members, as I'm sure others are trying to do as well. But if that briefing sheets would help to bolster that, I'm sure they would be appreciated. Yes, the competing nature of people's requests are always a very difficult one to square away, and I suppose it takes us back to that main element that this is a public health issue. The reasons that you're bringing it in are public health related. We obviously want to make sure we're accommodating as many needs as we possibly can, but we can't lose sight of that, and I'm sure that there will always be times where people are not as content as others in the interventions that are put in place. Councillor Lumsden, I think you had your hand up.
Yep, thank you, convener, and thank you, Mrs. Beattie. It's a question that actually might be for Mrs. Beattie or Mr. Littlejohn. It's around the section between Market Street and Bridge Street. It's obviously handled a little bit different because there's obviously no cars, no buses either. And I presume that that decision was taken just because that is the busiest section looking at people density and the need for physical distancing, and that's why that decision was made.
Yeah, so I'll maybe start, and Mr. Littlejohn can come in on that. But I mean, absolutely, that was the reason. I mean, the bus operators themselves acknowledged that these were the busiest bus stops. This was where the retail core was. We had shops obviously opening to a limited extent yesterday, but I think you could see with the queuing that took place outside of Primark, and the pedestrians being able to pass safely, the cyclists being able to pass the pedestrians safely, showed that, even with just that limited opening, that area will be under pressure. That is a situation that we will keep under constant advisement, and we will look at what can be done in that area. But the reality of it is that we have to try and make sure that we are creating as much space for physical distancing as possible. I'll let Mr. Littlejohn add anything.
Thank you, Mrs. Beattie. Thank you, Mr. Littlejohn.
Hi, afternoon. And thank you for the invitation to come along and participate this afternoon. I know a number of names on the screen that I can see. I know we've had conversations in the past about public health, and that public health isn't limited to folks like me with public health on my ID badge working in the NHS, but a sense that we're all public health. And listening to the conversations this afternoon, I mean, I just got a really much stronger, a real strong sense of that. I think that this is all public health, and we are all public health, because everything impacts on the health of the public. I think as somebody then working in the NHS, clearly our focus as an organisation, as an entity, as we moved through March and into April and May, was really on sick people and making sure that the people that were the sickest, that we had the treatment capacity to be able to treat them. And as we've come out of that, and I think as we began to see the effect of the national lockdown, and the real restrictions that we've all had to live with. Well, you can see the effect that's had on me, of these unprecedented times. As we've seen the effectiveness of that just simply by shutting everything down, how it's really reduced transmission to the point where, I mean, effectively we're not really detecting any cases now, just single figures here and there, hugely effective. At an enormous cost, and of course, I mean, I've obviously been listening with interest in terms of the costs and the range of costs to the range of stakeholders, to all of us that have accrued in relation to that. But I suppose why this particular programme of work really caught our attention when Susan Webb, as our Director of Public Health, was asked for her support for this programme. there was no hesitation from herself, from myself, from colleagues in terms of lending absolute support to this. We've been absolutely focused really on testing and getting our contact tracing systems into place. But I guess even as we've been doing that, we've been thinking about what are the other necessary elements of prevention. And as we think about the restrictions being lifted and people being able to mix again, I guess there's a couple of things that have just really focused our minds, which is, first of all, that it's not gone. The virus is still out there. That cities in particular are at risk, cities more so than rural areas, just because of population density and because of population mixing. I guess Aberdeen's a particularly interesting case in terms of oil and gas and its national and international inflows of staff. And I suppose the lesson of Leicester in terms of what does the future look like, and does the future look like local lockdowns? As I said, we're all aware of the huge economic costs of the unprecedented lockdown that government has taken. But I suppose as we move into the new future and think about the risk of local lockdowns and the local economic impact, as well as all the other impacts that could come with that, I guess these are the things that have really been focusing our minds in terms of I think we've got all of our ducks in a row in relation to treatment and testing and contact tracing. All of that's now in place, but it's not enough. And I think as we look through the summer into the autumn and into the winter, what we're obviously thinking about is, are we going to see further spread? And one of the big lessons I think that we've taken from all of this, in our own experiences of doing testing in care homes and in hospitals, is the surprising number of people who test positive for the infection, even though they don't have the classic signs or symptoms of COVID-19, and the potential for spread before people even know that they've got symptoms. So I guess one of the real worries then is that as we begin to lift the restrictions and we start to get to go about our daily lives again and start to, the welcome ability to see friends and colleagues and family, the real worry has to be the dangers that there could be transmission again before we ever know that it's being transmitted. And clearly the contact tracing system is entirely dependent on people recognizing the need to get tested, choosing to go and get tested, and not to be facing perverse incentives not to get tested. And I get, these are obviously themes that have played out in the media widely in terms of why people might try and hide their symptoms or play down their symptoms. But like I said, we're also aware of folks not knowing that they've got symptoms. So contact tracing and testing is a really important part of this. But actually, this fact that it's not over, and this fact that as we move through the summer into autumn and winter, that actually all of the hygiene, the really unusual experiences that we're all continuing to have, all the experiences of going around Tesco's, for example, and one-way systems and queue management systems and all the rest of it, it's frustrating and it's inconvenient, it's troubling, it's worrying, but nonetheless it's the reality of what we've got. So I think when we saw the council taking forward and taking the opportunity of the Sustrans funding to put a bid in, we were hugely supportive of it, because we could see that helping people to have space, the further apart we can stay from one another, the less time we spend close to one another, the lower the risk of transmission. And that clearly has implications as we move into flu season later on in the year for the health system, for the social care system, but also, like I say, in terms of potential city local lockdowns into the future as well. And so we've absolutely welcomed, I mean, even amongst all of the intensity of work within the NHS, the intensity of work everywhere, of course, all at pace, all needing to be done, we've nonetheless absolutely welcomed the chance to sit on the working group in and around this. And I have to say hats off to the skills of your council officers and the town planning and the traffic management, and I mean the technicalities of all of that, the complexity of what they're managing. As Mrs. Beattie said, in really short periods of time, amongst stakeholder complexity, I think they absolutely deserve to be commended for the work that they've done in such a short period of time. And really just to end by saying that it really is a vital part of preventing us having a subsequent outbreak in Aberdeen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Littlejohn. I think that's been really helpful for you to put that into that public health perspective for us, because often we're looking at through the lens maybe of the council's position around that, the actual implementation of the work, but to get the public health lens on it, I think is really, really helpful. And it's also very pleasing for us to hear that you're working very closely with our officers and in order to bring the interventions forward in a way that will protect the public, which is, what we're all trying to do at the end of the day. So thank you for that, and appreciate you taking the time out to come today. You've maybe been sitting listening to quite a bit before we got to this point, so we appreciate your patience around that and for coming in. Councillor Lumsden, did you have anything else, or was that?
No, that was really good to hear, Convener. I just had one last question for Miss Beattie, and that was around the letter that went from the bus companies to, I think it was the Chamber, talking about the council misleading the Scottish Government. Would you have a response to that?
So I did have a response to that, and a letter has gone back to them. I mean, we have been in constant contact with both Sustrans, but also with Transport Scotland colleagues, and indeed on the Friday before the measures in the city centre went in the first time, we had a very long meeting with senior officers within Transport Scotland. So they were fully aware and fully supportive of the approach that we were taking, and they recognised the difficulty in balancing all the stakeholders' needs. But we're also really happy with the way that we were saying, that this will be an iterative process. It has to be, we are trying new things within our public realm in a very short period of time. So it is really important that where we can make changes, that we do that. I wasn't very happy with the idea that they were misled, because that's not the views that we've got back in terms of our consultation with both Scottish Government and Sustrans.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Beattie. That's helpful to have that clarified. I don't see any other hands, so probably if we just try to maybe formalise things. It's my intention to move the recommendations as they appear in the report 21 to 24, but I have some additional recommendations which I'm hoping can be circulated.
Thank you, Convener. We'll get that done just now.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Dunsmore. I'll maybe just speak to it a little bit while that is being circulated. I don't know whether we will have any amendments or not, but I think it's been very helpful from the questioning today to hear from both Mr. Littlejohn and Mrs. Beattie about the work that has gone on behind the scenes in order to deliver the Spaces for People agenda. We will remember back in May we gave permission for a bid to be submitted, and for once when it was submitted we got the amount that we requested, which is quite unusual, I know, but it was pleasing that we managed to secure that. However, as with these things, it's always the difficulty of delivering on that agenda, and I think we've heard from Mrs. Beattie and Mr. Littlejohn just the collaboration that has gone in within the working group and behind the scenes in order to deliver it. I think it was Councillor Yule, when he started his opening remarks, was looking for some wording around the pace. I think it's safe to say that it has been delivered at pace, and it's testament to officers. And I have to say, Councillor MacDonald, who was tasked to liaise with officers from an elected member point of view in order to bring these proposals forward. And I know that she has been putting in a fair shift herself in order to work with officers to make sure that the different interventions can actually be delivered on the ground. Now, we've heard about the time for consultation. Some people were raising issues about whether there would be further consultation. The nature of these interventions mean that they have to be delivered quickly. But I have to say, from my own experience in my own ward, there has been a level of consultation that has surprised me given the short time space that we've had. I know, because I was in the meeting, that they've met with Community Council, they've met with business groups there, Rosemount Rocks. They met with myself and other councillors for the area, so we could discuss the concerns we had around the bus issues. I know that they've met with the bus companies, and I'm delighted to say that a vast majority of proposals that were brought forward from those different forums, the officers have acted upon, and I think they're to be commended for that. Now, it's clear from Mr. Littlejohn's remarks that this is public health driven, and we can't lose sight of that, because at the end of the day, it's about the well-being and safety of the people in Aberdeen that is at the forefront of our minds. But as we look towards that recovery phase, we also need to make sure that we're doing as much as we possibly can to unlock and open Aberdeen up again, because our economy is dependent on making sure that businesses are able to operate, and indeed people are able to go back to work, they're able to move about the city in a safe way, they're able to use the facilities that we have in our city centre and in other areas. So that, you know, it's right and proper that this project is also linked within the socio-economic plan that we'll be debating in the next item. Now, the couple of amendments that I've made is really just to take note of the temporary and flexible nature of the infrastructure that's been put in place, because as always with these things, sometimes the information that goes out into the public domain is not always that accurate. Some people have maybe been led to believe that these are permanent measures. It's quite clear that they're not. The funding was put in place specifically for temporary measures, and that's what we are trying to deliver. I mentioned that we had received funding that we had requested at the time, but there were a number of items that weren't covered by the initial funding request that we put in, and there may be an ability to apply for some more funding because that budget was increased at the time following our application. Now, we heard earlier about the efforts that are being made to open up schools so that we can deliver on the government's commitment around that August opening. We will need to look at interventions around schools and public buildings. And indeed, when we come to the point where these measures are to be lifted, there was no funding in that original grant application, which included the lifting of those measures. So I think it is important that we put something within the recommendations today that lays that out. The other aspect that we've got is to just recognise that there is a consultation currently ongoing regarding the beach and the active travel corridor plans that have been laid on the table so that people can have an opportunity to look at those. I accept that a week perhaps isn't a great deal of time, but the nature of us delivering on these interventions is that we need to move forward quickly, and it was just really to highlight to people that that was there for them to do. So I think that's just what I wanted to say around the recommendations we've put forward, to underline everybody's thanks to the officers and Councillor MacDonald, and indeed public health colleagues and all those who have taken part in the consultation processes that we've had to date. It's appreciated that you've taken the time to help us to develop interventions that meet as many needs as possible of the competing areas within the city centre. Councillor Yule, do you have an amendment?
No, convener, I don't. I just wanted to say that I was very happy to agree with the B, C, D and E that you've proposed. I think they are good sense. and it shows that we can agree. So I'm very happy to support that and move forward on that.
Thank you. Do we have any other amendments then, or are members content to agree and move on, noting our thanks to all those involved? Yeah, okay, I think that means we're happy to move on. Thank you very much to everybody that's attended, Mr. Littlejohn in particular. We appreciate your contribution today. Thank you. Okay, that takes us on now to 7.6, which is the socio-economic rescue plan. Do we have questions? No, I'm not seeing Mr. Sweetnam coming on, but I'm not seeing if we've got, do we have any questions for Mr. Sweetnam? Are we happy to move forward? Not seeing anybody indicating. Okay, we had, again, this plan, as we know, was, oh, sorry, somebody's hand is going up there. It was Councillor Ewell. Sorry, okay. Councillor Ewell, yes. Do you have a question? Oh, I think you're on mute.
You might argue, convener, that's the best way for me. But too much, no. I was going to make a comment, convener, but if you're going to suggest adding an addendum to the recommendations, I'll maybe just hold fire.
Okay, yes, I do have. Could we maybe get it circulated?
That's just being done just now, convener. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll maybe just give people an opportunity just to have a quick look. Get back on track.
Sorry, convener, can I ask?
Yes.
In terms of your motion,
yes.
In 2.1 to 2.6.
2.126 is the same as the report.
Okay, cheers. Thanks very much, convener.
I'll talk a little through and I'll cover the extra parts that I've got. Unless Councillor Yule, did you want to come back? Have you got, is that your hand up from before? Or?
Sorry, convener, that was my hand up from before. Apologies.
Okay, I'll maybe just talk through a little bit, and then we can get to the bits that are additional, and then if anybody has something different to move, we can do that. I've mentioned a couple of times today that we've acknowledged the efforts that the council has made and the work that has gone on behind the scenes in order to deliver that to deal with the immediate crisis that we found ourselves in. But now we are moving from that rescue phase into recovery. I think we heard from Mr. Littlejohn that the efforts that people have made during that lockdown period are actually reaping the rewards for us. We certainly don't want to become complacent, but I think we need to recognise that the hard work of the public has resulted in us being able to move forward into that recovery phase, and we'll wait for further guidance from government around what that may look like. The plan that we have here is it's a short-term plan about how we make sure we can try to help that social piece where people have struggled during this crisis, but also look at the economic piece and what we need to do as a local authority to move that forward. Now, I say that as a local authority, but the report is much wider than that, because the plan is based on our local outcome improvement plan. It's based on our regional economic strategy. It takes into account the net zero vision and the infrastructure plan that goes along with that green vision. And all of those things have been looked at and utilised before this plan has been drawn up. And I think we all understand that those areas are not delivered or indeed produced by the council alone. We work with others in order to draw those strategies and plans up, and then we work with others in order to deliver that. It's important that we take partners along with us on that process, and that's why in the report it highlights that we will form the group that will in fact drive this plan forward, and we are taking people onto that group from various sectors and organisations. I've said before today, and I think the facts and figures are out there for all to see, Aberdeen is going to be one of the hardest hit places in the UK. As Councillor Bolton, I think it was, pointed out in some remarks she made earlier, the COVID-19 has had a major impact, just as it has in other places. But that, coupled with the downturn in oil and gas that we were already experiencing, has made the impact for us even harder. Now, work to date, I think it's commendable what's going on, particularly around the business resilience piece. We set up a business resilience group very quickly. We had a business response hub that was being run, which allowed us to process that grant funding to get that money out very quickly to businesses that was coming from government sources. And despite some of the publicity that was around here, because I was angered, I have to say, by some reports that Aberdeen City Council were somehow letting the businesses in this city down because of the processing rate. You know, I would have actually expected better, I have to say, from Kevin Stewart, MSP, who used to sit on this council and has an understanding of the commitment of our workforce, to make those remarks. But it was clear that often the statistics don't show the real story. And clearly, when you look at all of the facts and figures that are before us, we actually had a very high process rate, one of the highest in Scotland. And it was commendable that staff were taking extra time to help those businesses that may not have had the relevant information submitted with their original claim, supporting them to make sure that they maximise the number of businesses that actually received help. Through the Health and Social Care Partnership, we were looking at the care for people aspect, and they set up a group very quickly. That allowed them to assist the most vulnerable, both in practical and emotional support within the city, and that work continues. Within our own organisation, the Crisis Support Centre, 24-hour crisis line, dedicated website page giving people information and help. And you know, the numbers of calls that we had in relation to food and finance, housing, shielding, queries right across the board, all dealt with in a timious and supportive and empathetic manner by officers. We even saw the Lord Provost launching his charitable trust, hardship fund, which has received a great number of public donations, and also the incorporated trades, who kicked it off with a large generous donation. All of these things helping to provide for the people in the city. And the food provision strategy, which CFind along with the voluntary sector have helped to deliver, have been lifelines for the people of Aberdeen during these very, very difficult times. We've also seen over 7,000 volunteers, just members of the public, stepping forward to help people in their own communities. And that is no mean feat, that people will put themselves in that situation, particularly when there's a public health issue that, you know, not fearful for their own safety, they're willing to step forward and help others. And there has been an impact for each and every one of these people that have been doing their bit, whether it be on their time or the time that they spend with their families, and we can't underestimate that. The good work is abound, and I think that's clear, but we also need to look at what we do as we're moving forward. We need to focus on that short term, that rescue response, and deal with the immediate effects of the economic crisis. But the main goals of the plan are focused on health, the community, and ensuring people can access employment. That's what will allow us to move forward. We also need to link it to that, the focused investment around that green recovery piece. Our budget back in March, we talked about that earlier today, very much had that focus on that green environmental aspect. And we weren't doing that just because it's fashionable to do it. We were doing it because we really believe that Aberdeen has a competitive advantage around these things. We've built up the skills and technology that will allow us to build on that moving forward. So the plan that we've got before us today, I think, provides us with an opportunity to anchor the existing inclusive economic growth and the LOIC priorities that we've worked so hard in this city over the last few years to bring forward. And it helps us to focus on the needs of the local community and the businesses that we represent. It also looks at how we can minimise the harm and the impacts of the current crisis wherever possible. So we're not losing sight of that, because as Chris Littlejohn pointed out earlier, just because we've got over the initial situation doesn't mean we can become complacent. And I certainly don't think that that plan allows us to do it. It's also tied in with a business charter, which was a budget commitment back in March, and that was about us bringing forward a charter that would allow us to inform the business community what we could do for them, but just as importantly, what they could do for us, working in collaboration. And I've worked closely with community planning partners to try and build some foundations around how we can best use, particularly that corporate social responsibility that we saw coming to the fore with the hardship fund, how we can use that to best effect for the citizens of Aberdeen. And, you know, I've got a couple of papers coming up at community planning tomorrow that will show how we can do that. And so I'm delighted that that business charter has been able to come forward as well, so that the business community can see for themselves exactly why we want to work in partnership with them and how that partnership can work. I've also included in my recommendations just underlining the 75,000 that was set aside for a cooperative fund. We had that in our budget as well. I think now is a good time for us to make sure that we're stepping forward with that. I think there's an opportunity to look at how we could set up community benefit societies and co-ops, particularly given the current economic crisis that we've got and the fact that people may be losing jobs elsewhere. How can we try to stimulate that economic piece by bringing forward things that have the greatest benefit to communities and those involved? So that inclusive economic growth and the community wealth building that is throughout all of our plans, particularly the local outcome improvement plan, but in a lot of what the council does itself, I think they can be complemented by the socio-economic plan and the charter that we've got before us today. I think it's vital that people see Aberdeen as a place where they can live, work, visit and invest in the future. That's what we've made the major investment in capital projects over the years. That's why we've invested in the people in the place up to now. But we need to showcase that. We need to tell people that Aberdeen is open for business. We are here, we are ready to work with others, and we are ready to accept that inward investment that hopefully we can get from government and the private sector. So I think the idea around that video piece, which will be done in-house, so at no great cost, will help us to do that from a council perspective. It shows that leadership, and I would hope that everyone can support what we've got before us, the additional recommendations I've put in place, because I think if we are to deliver on that local outcome improvement plan vision of everybody prospering, we need to bring these forward. So I'm happy to move the motion, and hopefully I have a seconder.
Convener, I'm happy to second you.
Thank you.
Is there an amendment or?
I'm not sure. Do we have any amendments? Anybody want to add anything? Yes, Councillor Nicholl and then Councillor Yule.
Thank you very much, convener. You said it no great cost at the end there. Could you give us an idea of what you consider no great cost, please?
That's my poor terminology. I would expect us to be to deliver it from in-house resources, so at no extra cost to us.
Thank you.
Taking it from current budget.
Councillor
Councillor, did you have a question?
No, I have an amendment.
Okay. Do you want to circulate it? Do you have it to circulate?
Well, no, I don't have it to circulate, convener, because I was very content with the recommendations, but I have an amendment to what you've just circulated. So I'm sure you'll appreciate I couldn't amend what I didn't know.
Okay. So what is the amendment?
It's very brief. Hang on, let me just I'll get back up in my screen. You were okay. So in 7, convener, which is the in the 1, 2, 3, the 4th line of that.
Yeah.
1, 2, delete the word since and the number 2012, because there actually were some investments pre-2012, and if we're going to promote the city, let's promote all the good stuff. Let's not just limit ourselves to what's happened since 2012, and good stuff has happened since 2012, convener, by way of investment. And in 8, convener, you tried to work out where exactly to put it, but in addition to Cooperative UK and local citizens, perhaps after Cooperative UK, could we add Social Enterprise UK? And then in the following few words, to set up community benefit societies, cooperatives, and social enterprises within Aberdeen. Is that clear, convener?
Yes, I think that was quite clear. Yeah, I'm happy in the spirit of cooperation. I'm happy to accept both of those.
Well, convener, can I say thank you very much. It is nice to see that we can agree, and perhaps if you'd included us in the conversations about this in advance, we could have agreed on even more.
When sensible suggestions come forward, I'm always happy to include them. It's when the nonsensical ones come forward about delaying and dithering that I can't accept. So yes, on this occasion, I'm happy to accept both of those, and I'm glad we've got consensus.
Yes, well, convener, all my suggestions are always sensible. It's just not my fault. You don't always agree that they are.
Well, on that we're going to have to divide, I'm afraid. But I'm conscious that we have been at 3.5 hours already, so we perhaps will move on to the next item. Now we've got agreement on that. So thank you for that. That now takes us on to the net zero vision and infrastructure plan, which was us. I mean, I don't know if anybody's got any questions on this. Councillor Yule, you have your hand up still, but I'm not sure if that's a new question or from the previous time.
Apologies, this previous time.
Okay. Do we have any questions on the net zero vision? No. I would be proposing on this, because we were bringing forward the terms of reference, as you know, and looking at the leadership, the makeup of that board. And the delivery unit. I would be moving recommendations 2.1 to 2.3 as they appear in the report, but I've added additional recommendation, and it is to agree the dates for the first meeting of the leadership board and the supporting delivery unit are convened as soon as possible and by the end of September 2020. So I thought it might be useful to put a date in there, so that we at least can make sure that nothing slides around that. And I know that Mr. Sweetnam has endeavoured to make contact with those members who we've agreed, if we agree today, are on the board, to make sure that we can arrange a suitable date for that. So on that basis, Mr. Sweetnam's come on to screen there, looking very with the Aberdeen logo behind him, which is always great promotion for the city. Are we happy to agree that, or does anybody have any other amendments? I think it's up on screen now. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Yeah. Councillor Yule, are you happy?
Thank you for asking me specifically, convener. I'm ecstatic.
I wasn't sure who it was. I presumed it was Councillor Nicholl that said yes. So you're okay. Okay, right. That takes us now then on to 7.8, which is the governance arrangements update. Do we have any questions on that? No questions? Okay. I have an amendment which I think that's the previous one that was coming through there. So if we could maybe have that circulated, that would be helpful. And then I'll maybe just thank you, Mrs. Lansmart. And then I'll maybe just give people a couple of minutes to have a look at that, okay? Is that enough time for people to have had a look?
Convener, I would be minded to move an amendment. Now, I think there's actually quite a lot in yours that would be pretty identical. I'm just trying to pick out the bits that are slightly different. And I see you've got 9, agrees to delete standing order 16. That's one of them. That's our standing order, isn't it, for remote meeting? Am I correct?
Yes, that's the one that was put in place at the Urgent Business Committee. I think in March, was it? I'm trying to think when it was now.
I mean, if the officer could circulate mine, where I'm coming from is I would be minded to, for example, leave that in, because if we had a spike, we could find ourselves back in the situation of having to meet remotely and through no other way. Yeah.
I think the reason that we have it in to remove it is that I think there may be there's an opportunity for conveners, I think, to allow it anyway. But is Mr. Bell with us? Could you?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just to confirm that even with the removal of Standing Order 16, there is a provision in law that would allow a convener to direct that a meeting can take place remotely. So if there was that spike to occur later on in the year, you would have that option still in law at minimum.
but we would also have the security of knowing how it should work with Standing Order 16. Simply being there as a backup.
Yeah, the Standing Order 16, as you say, it provides that additional clarity for elected members to see how it would work in practice. Having had a look at other local authorities, it's not usual for them to actually make provision. So if members were to agree today to remove Standing Order 16 with a view to keeping the focus on meeting in the townhouse, that wouldn't be unusual and would be no different to other local authorities.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I think that's helpful. Do you have something else, Councillor Nicholl, or because I think Councillor Yule's got his hand up?
I don't know if you've managed to read my one, but essentially I think the other main difference we have is I would keep in the council diary the meeting of the 24th. I think that's a helpful one to have in. But that's obviously, I think that's the two main differences trying to look at it. It's quite hard to get the two to balance on the screen together.
Okay,